All right, man. What does 9 ether mean?
9 ether.
Because I know you by like 3 different names.
Yeah.
I got you as Elijah, 9 feathers, 9 ether, I think is your social handle. I'm like, what does that mean?
Okay, so 9 ether, the term ether, it gets deep, right? So we know about the stages of matter, right? Solid, liquid, gas, but there's an electromagnetic spectrum as well. So the ethereal plane is one that's, I'll say, of a higher frequency or a higher energy than that of typical electromagnetism, right? Like the difference between an X-ray or a radio wave or a microwave is quite literally frequency. It's all an electromagnetic wave, right? But the ethereal plane is one higher. I'll give you an example before I get directly into 9 ether, right? You ever thought about somebody and then you get a Facebook notification from them or a text or something like that? Nonstop, right? So here's the thing. How do cell phones work? They're waves, electromagnetic waves, that have to travel on some network, hit a satellite, hit a cell tower, and then goes to somebody's phone. But before I can even send you a text, I have to think of you first, right? Before I can tag you on Instagram or Facebook, I have to think of you. This, we know the body is electric, but there's no generator generating a voltage in your body. What generates the electricity? Remember, I said it's a higher energy than electromagnetism. This is the ether, right? This is the ethereal plane. So the way that I generate a thought, because we know we can hook up sensors to the brain and monitor, right, neuroelectric, chemoelectric paths.
Yeah, I just had a QEEG last week.
You know, so it's what ends up happening is you generate a thought that travels on the ether, right? And it gets to you because I've met you before, so I'm familiar with your frequency. So that's kind of like your cell phone number equivalent. I know who Luke is, so before I move to text you, you will think of me not by coincidence. It's because I already sent you I'm already talking to you in the ether, but the ethereal plane travels faster than the radio waves on your cell phone, right? So I have to think of you before I text you. So by the time I hit send, and it goes to the satellite, to the cell towers, and then to your phone. It's the reason you think of somebody, like you said, nonstop before you get a notification from them. Like we say, oh, speak of the devil. We say that, right? Because yes, you thought me up, or more rather, I thought you up. I spoke to you on the ethereal plane. So with that said, that interstitial energy, that connection of the all, right? 9 ether tends to be appropriated for that higher energy of electromagnetism, if you want to say, but there's a cosmic connection to it. So all of that said, 9 ether has to deal with the cosmic connection between melanin and melanocytes, brain essential melanin. There's melanin and pheomelanin and neuromelanin, right? That brain essential melanin. So that cosmic connection deals with, as far as ether is concerned, deals with the classes or the capacity that one has to produce melanocytes, melanin, and their capacities to operate. So 9 ether is of the highest melanin. You know, they say Aboriginal peoples are the original members. So it's this 9 ether, then there's 6 ether or 3 ether. It's how it's been appropriated in the conscious community. So 9 ether just speaks to, I told you we was getting deep today. So 9 ether
We're just
speaks
right
to
off the deep end.
out the gate.
I love it. Dude, have you ever heard of Dr. Jack Cruz?
I'm not.
Oh, bro, I gotta turn you on to this guy.
Okay.
He's an early guest on my podcast, one of the audience favorites too, and he's really into the science of light. So you have people that are into health, and everyone, you know, his argument is everyone's all obsessed with like food and exercise, but we're light beings, and our circadian biology is controlled by light. His whole shit is about melanin and our relationship to the sun and artificial lighting and things like that. Mm-hmm. He's a neurosurgeon, so he works on brains. Funniest thing about this cat, apart from he has a very abrasive personality. In fact, last time I saw him in California a few years ago, I think Donald Trump was president at the time, and there was a lot of contention in the country about it, which I'm sure we'll get into today. And I looked at Jack because he'll just come out and be like, "You're full of shit." You know, he's just very bombastic personality. And I said, you know what, Jack, you're like the Donald Trump of health. You know? He's like, I'll take that. But he's a neurosurgeon. And one of the crazy things he told me, I said, dude, what's it like because I always try to put myself in someone's shoes, you know, a neurosurgeon, what does that mean? He said, well, I work on spines and brains, you know, he goes in and does that surgery. I was like, dude, what's that like? I mean, I cut my finger and I get queasy. And he goes, oh, it's no big deal, man. You know, I carve open the skull, yada, yada. And then I put some headphones on and I put on Metallica full blast. And I do my whole surgery listening to Metallica.
Interesting.
I'm just picturing dude with someone's cranium open. And he's just like, I'm like, wow. I mean, I guess if I could pick anyone to work on my brain, it would be him. But I'm like, can you put on some Beethoven or something?
Something a little more soothing,
Yeah. Anyway. I'm going to turn you on to Jack Kruse because his stuff as it pertains to health, and light and melanin is just incredible. Anyway, I digress. So what are 9 ether beings?
So 9 ether beings would be the aboriginal people, as we like to incorporate these days. That's what a 9 ether being is, right? So there's remember there's different capacities for melanin and melanocytes specifically. Not all classifications of melanin will undergo the exact same extent, I'll say, of processes, right? As far as, because remember, it's interesting we talk about light. Light is very much so information. This is a fact. This is why.
That's why I'm wearing my gilded glasses, dude.
Right? Yeah. So
I don't like being under these lights without them. I did it for years, and finally I was like, I don't care if I look weird, man. I feel much more relaxed.
Put them on. It's the shocking of the central nervous system, light that doesn't biologically embed. So it's obviously much more efficient for us to go outside and experience first light. Because you ever been asleep, someone flips the light switch on, it almost like hurts a little bit, that shock of the central nervous system. But when you have a light that biologically embeds, you don't get the same effect. Yeah, it'll be bright. You might say, okay, cool. But you're not going to come out of a dark room like a movie theater, then walk outside and the sun is out and it hurts. Almost, or it's just uncomfortable. Yeah. You're not going to experience that.
That's a good example.
So light is information.
I've never liked going to the movies in the daytime for that reason.
Yeah.
It's like creepy when you walk outside.
Yeah.
Something I didn't realize that, but something in the biology and your biochemistry is going like, what? No, mismatch. Yeah. How did that happen?
I would rather that though than be in a dark room and someone flips a halogen light on. I would rather walk out into the sun. At least it biologically embeds, and my cells, melanocytes, right? They can use that information, right? So the information as far as creating certain hormones or endorphins, right? Because we know hormones are instructions. It's an absolute fact. Adrenaline, beat faster, pump more oxygen. Oxytocin, bond, right? Cortisol, stressful, this and that, right? Dopamine, okay, have a certain affinity towards something so that you're more acclimated to it or more, so hormones are instructions. So with light being information, and we're talking about 9 ether beings and the capacities in which melanocytes can operate, knowing that light is information, you get certain vital, right? Vitality, like vitamin, raw, so to speak, right? We get certain nutrients from the sun. This is sunlight is a part of your dietary regimen, but it comes in different capacities contingent upon your ether content, as we'll say. Right. So it's the alphanumeric vitamin D is really, you can look on the back of a bottle, it's cholecalciferol. Right? And we can get into the
bro, I didn't know you were this deep on the health stuff.
All of it. Because it's all connected. Health, law, all of it. It's all connected.
Allison today's like, what are you going to talk to him about? I said, I'm not sure, but he's smart as fuck, so I'm not worried about it.
I appreciate it. It's vitamin B, right? It's cobalamin, right? We won't get too deep into it. But point is, sunlight is information. So the 9 ether being or 6 ether being or 3 ether being has a capacity to process certain informations and do other tasks with it, contingent upon XYZ. For instance, 3 ether beings are, I don't even like saying light skin, because the darker hue you are, technically the lighter skin you are, because you hold more sunlight within your melanocytes. I don't even like saying light skin.
Right.
But I'll say,
like you could say your black shirt and my black jacket has more light than if we're wearing white clothes.
So someone that doesn't have a certain melanocyte content, right, may not be able to hold as much light. Therefore, they won't be able to execute as many tasks for XYZ, right? So that's what a 9 ether being is the darker hued, higher melanin content of people. And then you have the 6 ether, the 3 ether, who might be known as people of European descent, or 6 ether may be like what some people call Dravidians, or what they call now Mexicans or Puerto Rican. Like they have a melanin content, Colombians, right? They have a melanin content who may be indigenous peoples, but they don't have the higher hue. Those, this is pretty much what it's about.
Yeah, Jack Kruse talks about, he's kind of a fair-skinned fella, not a redhead, but close to it. And he talks about the Fitzpatrick type. Have you heard of that? Mm-hmm. Right? It's really interesting when you start tracing back the genealogy of different places on the planet and what intensity of sun those people experienced, right? And even where you are in relation to the equator and the UV index and all that.
Behave different.
It's super interesting. Yeah. One of the things I remember him talking about years ago was the prevalence of high blood pressure amongst Black people that moved to northern latitudes away from the sun, where they haven't evolved to live, and then how that eventually ends up, with going on statins, and it's like this whole crisis. He lays the whole thing out. It's really, really interesting.
I gotta tune in.
Just like, well, you look where your people came from, and it's not so much about what they ate; it's about the relationship to light, and that'll inform where you're best suited to live, just based on the amount of melanin in your skin.
What you eat matters, because that vitamin B or that cobalamin, right, may manifest its way by way of the gut specifically. Most of your vitamin D or your serotonin, when people say they're vitamin D deficient, they become sadder. But remember, hormones are instructions. So serotonin, the happy hormone, right, will tell you if you're not receiving enough sunlight or vitamin D, right, you may not be as happy. But you know where 90% of your serotonin comes from? The gut.
Yeah. So
what you eat, remember, I said sunlight is a part of your dietary regimen. These things work together. He's right and exact. That's why I'm excited to tune into him.
I'll send you some podcasts.
Because he's talking my language.
Yeah, well, it's funny. He's also the guy that, I think dude saved my life in a way. I've told the story many times, so you guys just fast forward that 30-second fast forward thing right now. But I was really aware of EMF, right? Cell towers, Wi-Fi, your cell phone, all this stuff. I was very aware of that. And I moved in this apartment in LA, and I got really sick for like about 3 years, and I couldn't figure it out. And I'm really healthy normally. I was getting sick all the time, insomnia, migraines, my vision went bad. I had to start wearing glasses. It's just train wreck. My tinnitus, just all sorts of shit. And so I went to him for health advice, and he's like, well, are you watching the sunset and the sunrise every single day? That's number one, ground level priority above everything else, to the point that you're speaking to. And I said, well, I'm doing the sunrise because I could see the sunrise on the horizon from my apartment on the second floor. And I said, but I'm not doing the sunset. So I did an interview with him out in Venice when he was visiting. And then I went home and I snuck into the office building next door that was 3 stories high. There was 1 story higher than my apartment where I could see the sunset. And so I'm climbing. I didn't really sneak in, but it was a little business office building or whatever. So I go up to the 3rd floor, and I'm about to open the doors to the roof, and there's all these warning, radiation, Verizon, warning, radiation signs everywhere. And I'm like, oh no, this is not what I think it is. I open the door, there's 2 massive cell towers pointing right at my bedroom. And I was like, bing, there it is. So in a sense, had he not inspired me to really get on my sunrise and sunset game to get that, that infrared light and set the circadian rhythm and everything, right? And then I told him about it afterward. I said, Jack, dude, you saved my life, because I've discovered those cell towers. They were hidden by this kind of faux wall. Otherwise, I would have moved right away had I seen them. Yeah. And I said, and he said, as a neurosurgeon, he goes, dude, you're so lucky you don't have brain cancer right now.
Oh, really?
Because they're about 100 yards from my bedroom, pointed right at it.
All a sick cell is a cell whose mitochondria is not vibrating at peak efficiency. That's all it is. Regardless of what it's caused by, but what's one thing that's going to affect your vibration? Another vibrating object will either raise or lower your vibration specifically. So that constant EMF exposure, right, was absolutely, I would say 100% attenuating, raising or lowering to some degree all your cellular mitochondria.
Yeah, 100%. And I moved right out. As soon as I moved out, my health started improving, and has been doing so ever since.
Couldn't be a coincidence.
Well, they say age comes with wisdom, and I'm hoping that's true. But unfortunately, it also comes with wrinkles. So I'm going to let you in on a secret that's been soothing out my complexion and keeping my skin firm and toned. It's the red light face mask from Discharge. You might know Discharge as a holistic wellness brand with a huge range of science-based products to optimize your life. I'm a big fan and have been for quite a while. Their red light face mask emits both near-infrared and red light, helping to boost the production of elastin and collagen in your skin. Treatment time's about 20 minutes a day, and because it doesn't obstruct your eyes, it doesn't even have to interrupt your flow. I just strap mine on, set a timer, and go about my day. Another great feature is that it's cordless and rechargeable. Plus, it puts out literally 0 EMF, which is super important, especially on a sensitive area like your face. So to get your red light face mask, here's what you do. Go to bondcharge.com/lifestylist and use the code lifestylist to get 15% off. Oh, and unlike other brands, BondCharge very intelligently removed the blue and green light so you can be sure the mask won't disrupt your circadian rhythm or your sleep if you use it at night. Again, that's BONCHARGE, bondcharge.com/lifestylist, and that code again is also lifestylist.
All right, so let's talk about the real topic at hand. Thank you for indulging me on, an offshoot there. That's really interesting. I didn't know we had some commonality in that area too. So let's start talking about law. I've done a number of shows. I had Brother Truth on, which is how I met you. Great guy, so knowledgeable, so passionate. We did like a 3-hour podcast. Then he comes downstairs and does another 3 hours with our little law dojo group. I'm just like, this guy's on fire. Oh. I had Brandon Joe Williams on a couple times talking about his perspective. And I think what's great about this movement is, well, there's good and bad, right? And we'll unpack a bit of this. But now I won't say the general public, but people who are real truth seekers are starting to learn, wow, law is really important. And what we know about it is very little, generally speaking. And so you now have people trying to extricate themselves from the system in various ways through learning different aspects of the law. And so everyone kind of has their own methodology and their own system, and I don't know that everyone agrees, especially when you talk about status correction and things like that. But at least people are making progress. And then maybe on the downside, you have some grifters out there that are like, ooh, opportunity to make some money off people, selling them fake ass programs and all that. We'll talk about that later. But I just want to preface the law thing for people that are new to this episode and are like, what law? This isn't the lifestylist. I'm like, yeah, this is really important because we're talking about the matrix of COVID 1984. I mean, all that did was just reveal what's been going on in the background for hundreds, if not thousands of years of enslavement of all humanity right across the planet. So now a few people are like, well, that sucked. What do we do about it? And I really believe getting an understanding of law and then sort of choosing your lane and choosing what actions you want to take are really the only key. Yeah. And so maybe, we'll put all that in the show notes, those other episodes, by the way, at lukestorey.com/9ether with the number 9. And we'll start, your perspective maybe of just explaining how you would define natural law, just as an overarching blanket. And then we'll start to get into some of the nuances.
Well, let me be as succinct as possible on the big umbrella as I can. Natural law is all that there is. It's everything. When people say there's nothing new under the sun, this is an absolute fact, right? We can say something as quick as I have on a watch, right? Well, how did this watch come to be, right? To a degree, people from stopwatches and things that they wear around their neck, but people wanted to be able to tell time without looking at the big clock in the sky if they're too far away from it. But then where did that come from? A sundial, where did that come from? Somebody observed a shadow casting in their yard and said, this shadow wasn't here some time ago. Right. And it's the sun. It's natural law. There's nothing new under the sun. Right. So when I say natural law is all that there is, everything, whether you're talking about consumer law, commercial law, trust law, business, whatever it is, it all comes from natural law, actions, consequences, what I like to call ma'at. Right. It's balance. It's all balance, balancing the scales. That's why Lady Liberty, right. The Lady, they'll have a scale, right. Blindfolded. Scale. What's the balance? How have you remedied this situation? Are you entitled to restitution? What was the damage? And then what are you owed from that? It's a ledger. It's all balancing the ledger. If I strip the earth, since we're talking about natural law, if I strip the earth of its nutrients to refine rock to make metal or whatever it is, and I do that for long enough, that land becomes barren. Deserts get created, right? If I continue to pull from the earth the fruits and vegetables, I don't put the seeds back, right? Or even our waste that we take from it, it doesn't go back into the earth specifically. You change its chemical composition. It's imbalanced, and there's going to be some type of correction, right? It's chemistry, the Chatelier's principle, it's all of it, right? That each side of the equation has to, in fact, be balanced. That is, I'll say, the umbrella essence of what natural law is. And these are, amongst mankind, most articulated through religion. Right. So then we get into things like the Bible and the progression of the Bible to, I'll even say, the Quran, because a lot of people say the Quran is the holy continuation of divine knowledge. But if you look in it, it tells you to go back and reference the Bible specifically, or the past scrolls and scriptures, right? So they may have something in the Quran that has a point to address the problem with high interest rates, right? So that may be against Sharia, if I'm saying it correctly. It's basically against law. So they don't believe in high interest rates. There's something in, remember we talked about, I think before we started recording, right? Religion being law of the land, right? So it's natural law is most easily articulated by way of religion, because before there was any legislative body, what is it when we talk about common law? What is it that we were referencing, right? Even when it comes to you don't get enough sleep, this is what it cost. Oh, it's what it cost you. You don't eat right, this is what it costs you. If you've eaten this way through all these festivals and celebrations, you have to go on a 40-day fast. Eat this, stay away from that, because you want to operate at peak efficiency. You get into things, you get out of things what you put into it. Sounds like balance, doesn't it? You see, it's that natural law is all there is. It's all we can talk about in any subject. We could talk about math, science, relationships, politics. We can talk about growing food. It's all natural law. Octet rule, natural law. This doesn't bond with this, because if natural law, which is the only real law, which is why I say all law mimics that, if it acted as erratic as men make legislation, we literally wouldn't have a universe. If one aspect of the octet rule, or how covalent or non-covalent bonds or ionic bonds, if one thing just decided to change the way it behaves, things on a subatomic level literally would not even bond. You couldn't have anything.
Our reality would just dissolve.
So I'll repeat the very initial thing that I mentioned when you asked that question. Natural law is all there is.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's everything.
I know very little about any religions, although I did recently buy my first Bible. It's funny, I meant to bring it up here in case you don't need it, because you probably have the whole damn thing memorized. But
Not the whole thing.
I was like, you could point some shit out to me, like start here, because I just started from the beginning recently for the first time, and it's a little spooky to me. I don't know, but I'm getting there. But what I do really identify with are the 10 Commandments. To me, it's just like, if everyone just did that, which is impossible, of course, because people are fallible and greedy, and we're in these animal bodies that have all these crazy instincts, and we fall victim to them. But the 10 Commandments pretty much set the stage for success. Like to me, those are laws that I would, any logical person, I think, would have no problem being in compliance with. Just what's your take on that?
I would incline you to go to I won't say the original, because my records or my knowledge of records don't go back that far. But I would say there's argument in the conscious community that the 10 Commandments were taken from the 42 affirmations or 42 laws of Ma'at. Ma'at meaning balance, right? It's very interesting, right? Nepadic languages or Semitic languages have an ideographic and pictographic disposition. So listen to how deep this gets. One, the word for heart is ib. Ib literally means mind. Your heart is made up of the same thing as your brain is made up of, right? So the heart on the scale is how you determine whether you're going to go to what people will call now as heaven, or where you go depending on how you thought or how you behaved and how you felt, how you believed as a person. And Ma'at is depicted as a feather. Now, this is very interesting, because a feather is a principle of static, right? Static, like electrostatic. You see what I'm saying? And then the heart is electromagnetic as well. And if this is supposed to be representative of the mind, in law, we say guilt first starts in the mind. So if you follow the 42 principles of Ma'at, things like to have an answer for even nature, what we talked about, not to pollute the waters, not to eavesdrop, right? Things like honor your mother or father, right? If you've, the aspect in the Bible that mentions, if you've let the sun set or you go to bed angry at your neighbor, you have surely sinned. Well, what is that talking about? If you're angry, you got adrenaline and cortisol all through you. You see what I'm saying? And sin in the Bible means debt. If you think about the Lord's Prayer, they talk about forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sinned against us, right? Debt, sin are synonymous in those ideographic dispositions, those ideas, right? So if you have that cortisol pumping through your brain, you have, I won't get too deep into it, but tumor necrosis factor alpha, you're lowering the attenuating your mitochondria. You're making yourself sick when you're angry. When people are angry, they say things like what? Oh, you're salty. Well, that gets deep. when we start talking about the sodium, again, we won't get too deep into it, but I want to stay on to your question, right? You asked my take on the 10 Commandments. I would implore you to go to a more original source and study the 42 affirmations of Ma'at, because that has a more profound...
Let's put that in the show notes, Jared.
It has a more profound instruction, I'll say, guideline on if everybody were to do this, not only would society be great, the earth would become healthier. The world would be better. Contentions between your neighbor would dissipate significantly, right? So it's the thing I was talking about with the feather, Ma'at being the feather, and the entity that represents balance. It's your heart against the feather. The feather is the principles. Did you live in your heart, mind? Did you think? Did you live? Did you breathe in accordance with these laws? How in balance are you? You see what I'm saying? So I think that's a more profound way to look at natural law as far as do unto others as you want done unto you. Again, you do what you get. You get out of things what you put into it. We're right back to natural law, even again. You see what I'm saying?
I think that the even more simplified aspects of common law that started making sense to me in the beginning was just this idea of looking at the complexity of our codes, statutes, regulations. I mean, we're just like buried in a bunch of fake ass legislation when really, when I walk out the door every day, you know, what seems right to me is not to infringe on anyone else's rights, not to assert my will over someone's rights, not to defraud people, not to gossip about people, not to steal from people, not to physically invade anyone's boundaries. Basic stuff. Don't touch other people's shit. Don't hurt other people. You know, don't lie and don't lie.
Right.
I mean, that to me, if anything was to be illegal, it would be that. And I might have missed a couple things, but outside of that, there should be no laws.
Here's where it gets deep, right? Because when we talk about progressing, and by progressive, I don't necessarily mean get better. I mean from change to change from. When we talk about progressing from natural law into more man-made law, positive law is what it's called, right? Dealing with the affairs of man and having them to be regulated. So these, what some may consider arbitrary laws or legislations or regulations, right? They have to deal with the complexities of man, right? So if men are going to behave in commerce, if we're going to trade between each other, if we're going to harm even each other, right? It's what's the nature, or what was the intent? What's the nature of your infraction, right? So because men are so complex, these complexities came about for reasons, right? So it's common law being more just judge-made law off of principles of your religion or whatever edict this society followed prior to legislation, which is typically religion, like we mentioned. The legislative body says, okay, we're going to make this so matter of fact because you may interpret the Bible differently than I interpret a particular passage in the Bible, right? So if there's a difference in judgment, well, see, let's come together as a society and make this matter of fact. Boom, legislation. Boom, a statute. Nothing really actually wrong with statute. A lot of narratives in this movement allow us, or I'll say prevent us from fully understanding the law. But one thing Yusufel says, I love that he says this, right? I'm not entirely sure where he got it from, or it might be his own original thought, but it might even be the Hermetic law, I can't remember. But you are unbound by a thing the way that you are bound by it. So if you're going to engage your fellow man this way in positive law, right, you need to understand this system of law if you're going to free yourself from it. Because what you really want to free, I heard you mention this earlier, right, is freeing yourself from a system. It's not so much that you want to free yourself from a system. You want to free yourself of a particular jurisdiction, because we should leverage the system, because of what we mentioned before. Natural law is all there is. There's no getting out of a system because we live in a system of laws. Now it's about your judicial diction say so, your judicial say so. Come together, form your own jurisdiction so that you can engage and appropriate these laws that best suit your common affairs, right? So that's right. What it's really, really about.
So because our reality is constructed in part, well, not in part, actually, at its foundation, it is constructed by the laws of nature.
100%
law,
facts.
right? So
100% facts.
Because we're in this physical reality, there are inherent confines that are laws, principles, facts, that, capital T truths, right? And so unless we leave our body, we can't really leave the system. Right. I'm trying to track your line of thinking because it's a big idea.
I got you.
Maybe hopefully my cranium can stretch around it. So then it's not so much a matter of trying to leave the system, because you really can't if you're still alive, but it's a matter of where you exert your wisdom, overstanding, corrected myself, so that you know where you stand within that system to exert the rights that God gave you by the fact that you were just born. Like, that's where your rights came from. Is the creator of these laws and the systems within it created you as life, and you have certain rights within those confines. And if you want to live those rights, you have to understand who is trying to infringe upon them, and how to protect yourself from that happening.
And the protection is the key, right? Because we mentioned you are unbound by a thing the way you were bound by it. So because we were just coincidentally born into a society that we were bonded to by simply being citizens or being members of the society, you have to understand the system so that you can exit it properly. That's key, so that you can get the protection. You don't want to just go ghost, live off grid, do X, Y, Z. Especially if you're receiving income. That's a taxable event. You're going, give unto Caesar what is Caesar, give unto the Lord what is the Lord's. That's Caesar's currency. That's Roman currency. You got to deal with that, right? So to understand the laws of what makes a taxable event, to understand minimum contacts, if you remember that brief discussion in Austin the first time we met right in June, minimum contacts, understanding how there's a minimum contact so that a court can even establish personal jurisdiction, right? You have to understand that so that you can actually be apart from it. Because what I would hate for people to do is think that they separated themselves from a particular contact, and the entire time they haven't, and they begin to behave as if they have, but because in their system they haven't, you can still be held liable for things.
Ooh, right.
Again, you're unbound by a thing the way that you are bound by it. You have to understand it. It's not so much you want to leave the system, you want to leave a jurisdiction. That's what you so desire to do, so that you have judicial say-so over it, so that your interpretation of the script or natural law, or how you want to behave and engage with your fellow man, will be respected amongst your own kind. But you have to first effectively and efficiently break away from whatever jurisdiction it is that you're having a grievance with first. That's why if you read the Declaration of Independence, it's one of my favorite documents, is when they mention to abolish or overthrow or alter a government when they're effectively messing with your natural rights, with your privileges, things that are ordained to you by God. And they also mention you have to list your grievances. As civilized people, you should list your grievances. So they were able to address what the crown was doing and said, this is a violation, this isn't right, this isn't moral, because we are so aggrieved with this behavior, this system of governance. We believe it's our duty to abolish it, to alter it, or make our own jurisdiction altogether. So while we're declaring our independence from you, I'm going to let you know why, because this is how we are grieved. I'm going to give you a list of all of those grievances. So they understood what was going on with the crown. They would never make a frivolous point like, we don't like being taxed at all. No, we don't like being taxed to death. 2% tax raise is what made it all pop off, right? So I understand the tax system. This is why it's unfair. Because remember, they were all Englishmen at one point in time, right? I understand the military disposition, or the military law, or the laws that govern how we're affecting military. And this is how I think you're overstepping on it. But they were able to make that point and declare their independence as sophisticated, civilized men because they understood the laws surrounding the government. You see what I'm saying? So they said, we're going to come up with our own jurisdiction because we never want to face that again. So then they had the Articles of Confederation, which they said, okay, problems with that is we need a stronger government, X, Y, Z. So then they came with the Constitutional Convention. The Federalist Papers, they're constantly docking down, what type of government are we going to give the people, right? Well, democracy causes X, Y, Z, and this, and that, and there won't always be enlightened men at the helm of government. Let no more be said about confidence in men. Let them be bound by the Constitution, and all these other type of things, these discussions that they're having, because they understood where they came from literally where they came from, so they have to understand the system. And they said, this is how we're going to make our own to make sure we never end up in this position again. It's essential to understand whatever it is that you're doing. And if I may.
But then we did end up in that position again.
And here's the problem. Emotions, man. Emotions. But what's really dope about it is there was a reporter, I think, or a journalist that after the Constitutional Convention came and asked Benjamin Franklin, what type of government did you give us? And Benjamin Franklin, this report recorded that he said, a republic if you can keep it. Right? So there are also forces at play to influence and deter certain practices and thought processes and things like that that make us inclined to give up our republic. So you're right that it happened again, but here's the thing. America lacks efficient culture, right? An efficient culture should have practices and customs in place that prevent you from making detrimental effects to yourself. It would allow for, or it would prevent, right? It would circumvent things like allowing your emotions to get in the way because cooperatively you practice economics this way. Therefore, your dollar is always going to grow and it doesn't leave your particular community or body politic nation or whatever it is. Even if you wanted to, for whatever reason, have some emotionally compelling reason to go and put your money other places, if it's in your law from a young one, if it's in your law and your customs and your practices to patronize your own or within your community first, your economy will never fail. If it's in your law to, let's say, have an aptitude test, this is what I think America is in desperate need of, have an aptitude test before you vote. I don't think everybody should have the right to vote, especially if they're being taxed, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't come with an aptitude test. I don't think idiots should just be out here voting over feelings and whatnot or color or whatever it is.
You don't even need an ID to vote. I mean,
when we asked, what is the job of the executive branch? And people can answer the question, none of them should have been voting. You're voting for a president to do a job and you don't even know what the president's job is. So how do you know if they're doing it right or not? You don't even know. No, you shouldn't be voting. No, you should not. Should you have the right? Yes. You should also, with rights come responsibilities, duties. Oh, we know that, right? So what is your responsibility and duty? To damn understand your government. Learn your government. If you haven't done that, you don't have no business voting. It's a very interesting word I use. You don't have any business voting. That gets deep too. But you definitely don't have any business voting if you don't even voting for a president or a senator or a congressman, if you don't even know what they do or what they're supposed to do. People think character is going to yield good politics. Good character yields good politics. No, they have nothing to do with each other at all. Not even a little bit. So it is deep. But
I recently signed up for this subscription service called Quantum Upgrade, and it's been a major game changer for my energy, EMF resilience, and the overall feeling in our home. Let me explain how it works. Quantum energy is the energy that supports all life in the universe. It's nonlinear, non-local, and has an immense potential for health when it's harnessed and directed to you or into your living environment. Through many years of research and development, Quantum Upgrade created one of the world's most potent sources of usable quantum energy. So when you sign up for their service, Quantum Upgrade associates your home, car, phone, business, and even your pet with this energy. The energy you receive with the Quantum Upgrade is a high consciousness field that you can even customize on the fly. For example, I like to set different booster levels at specific times, such as before a podcast recording or during sleep. It's pretty awesome. The Quantum Upgrade energy streaming service has already been studied and tested by independent institutes, doctors, and labs with phenomenal results in placebo-controlled double-blind studies. It's been shown to improve red and white blood cells and even reverse stages 1 and 2 of blood clotting in only a few minutes. You can try it right now risk-free with a 15-day free trial by visiting quantumupgrade.io. All you got to do is use the code Luke15 to activate your free trial. Again, you'll find it at quantumupgrade.io.
As we sit here today, what's the date?
The 7th.
November 7th. So 2 days ago was a pretty monumental day in not only U.S. history, but world history.
It was.
I mean, I don't know what to think about it, but I do feel like we were running fast toward a very tall cliff. And maybe we might have bought some time. Maybe it's better than that. I don't know. That people have different opinions on it. I personally have a problem with the entire premise that any human being, any man or woman, has the inherent right to rule over another one.
Right.
So I feel like I don't know that my opinion or feelings on things like elections matter so much because I'm living in a world where each person is their own sovereign being and doesn't outsource any authority to anyone other than themselves and God. But I have kind of a utopian vision, but I do see that people are, many people are just indoctrinated into a very limited understanding of how the government works, to your point, and not really knowing which branch's job is what and what the role that they're actually voting for is. I kind of see the president of the United States. I mean, I think in recent times it's been sort of a puppeteer sort of face of a larger conglomerate of people that are behind the scenes of whose names we will never know, who are really running shit. And many people say Trump's just another one of those too. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But what I think, the president's role is basically the CEO of a corporation, because the United States Inc. is a corporation, and it's kind of their job is like, the manager. But you have a much more complex and deeper understanding of this. So maybe it would be useful at this time in history, now that we just had such a massive upheaval here, like what are the branches and the roles of these people in reality according to law?
So we can keep that very simple, right? Congress, I'm gonna say it this way. I'm gonna go macro and I'm gonna go micro.
Okay.
Right? So Congress, the legislative branch, their job is to one of their jobs. They have many enumerated powers and jobs, right? Like regulating commerce, right? Domestic and foreign, with the Indian tribes as well. To make laws, they have the power to wage war, things like that. But primarily, let's just stick to the primarily, I would say the most known, and I will say publicly relevant, I guess I'll use that term. The legislative branch's job is to make legislation, to make the laws. I'm put a pin in that for a second because when we go micro, but they make the laws. The judicial branch, their job is to say, hey, those laws that you made, let me make sure that they're in line with the Constitution and that there are no constitutional violations in it. Because remember, the Constitution did not make your laws, nor did it give you, let me not say that. The Constitution didn't give you your rights. It tells the government that you have rights. It formed the government and said, these people have rights and you can't do anything to infringe on them. Period. You can't do it. And if you do it, it's a constitutional violation. Us, the judicial branch, as the keepers of the Constitution, will smack that on down, right? So their job is to make sure that the laws that Congress made are in line with the Constitution. There are no violations. And the executive branch, their job is to enforce those laws. This is because of separation of power, checks and balances, things of that nature, so that not one branch has too much power, right? So you can make whatever law you want, but you can't charge any citizens with violating certain laws if they are in violation of the Constitution. So can't do that, right? Executive, it's a whole checks and balances thing, separation of powers. So now let's go back to the pen. It's the job of the legislator to make laws. What is the legislative body made of? House, the Senate, people that the people elected. So they came together. We said, you know what? You're like-minded. You're like-minded. You're like-minded. Who are we going to get? Because it's a Republican form of government. Who are we going to get to represent our desires, our morals, our dispositions, our woes, our concerns? Who are we going to get to produce to the public so that we, as people who believe a certain thing, can get some representation into government to make our will be done? Because it's power to the people. Right? So those congressmen are elected by the people. That's key. They're elected by the people. So when we talk about the legislative body's job and to make sure whether it's being done or not, what we really should be doing is looking within. Because if we did our jobs, our will would be enforced. So my partner asked a great question one time in class. He said, who feels like their legislator is representing their interest? And literally the entire class was like, not mine. Well, are you doing something to change it? Have you written your government? That's what courts will say sometimes. Hey, I don't like it too, but write your legislator. Write them. Did you tell them, hey, we're not all of us together? Did you go to City Hall, Town Hall? Did you go to these meetings and say, we are going to change everything and vote this way? And even if the people that are in office right now, we're saying, you're not going to get our vote. Oh, okay, you're going to give it to the other person? Don't worry about it. See, we're the ones who vote. So we're going to produce a new person and promote this person. And we're all going to vote for this person because this person shares our dispositions. This person even only came to be an electorate because you was over here messing up. So now we're going to put our guy in, right? So when we talk about the job of the legislator, we should really be talking about the job of the people. That's how deep it gets because we live in a government that requires the consent of the governed. And one way you consent is through acquiescence. Silence. Silence is acquiescence. We talk about that in this movement, right? So if you didn't say anything, you must have accepted.
Yeah.
First notice, hey, we're going to shut your lights off if you don't pay. You don't answer at all. Not a conditional acceptance, not payment, not go ahead and shut them off, nothing. Second notice, hey, I'm going to knock on the door 3 times now. I'm going to ask you again. We're going to do this if you don't tell me something. You don't say anything. You must have acquiesced and decided, I'm not going to open my mail, y'all. Dupe. I'm not going to open it. And they cut your lights off and now you're mad. Hey, why'd you cut my lights off? We told you like 3 times we were going to do it. You acquiesced to that. You see what I'm saying? So we live in a government that requires the consent of the governed. The legislative body, which is the job of the people, really, is to make the laws and establish what we're going to do commercially, what we're going to do when we want war. So if something happens to the nation or the country and the people are mad, you should be voting in such a way where we're saying we're not going to stand for that. Let's go to war. Or we don't want to go to war right now. I value my neighbor's child and my church member's son, or we want to make sure we keep ours in America and fix America first before we go do X, Y, Z. We don't feel like it's that big of a threat because Congress has the power to wage war, right? So it's our job to do these things, to make sure the Constitution is not being violated. You vote for those people that are, you vote for judges. People don't understand that. You vote for them, right? So once they get into office and they stay in office for time of their tenure and all this other good stuff. But if you understood your Constitution and you would vote for somebody that would not be so inclined to allow certain legislation to maybe straddle the fence that maybe perhaps you didn't like. We get back to it again. You are unbound by a thing the way that you're bound by it. We have it with rights come responsibility. Right. So the job, to be most succinct now, the job of the executive branch is to enforce the law that Congress makes. The job of the legislative branch, Congress, is to make laws. The job of the judicial branch is to make sure that those laws do not violate your unalienable rights. That's the job of the government.
So if the CEO of that executive branch is the president of the United States, but you've seen, over the past few years, just like a shell, right? That's like clearly not running anything. That means that they're not following, they're not upholding their side of the deal, right? Even if people did, supposedly elect someone and you've outlined their job and they're not doing their job because they're shitting all over the Constitution. I think that's what led to this week's upset, right? There's just enough of the people that live in the country are like, hold on. You're not doing your job.
Well, it's interesting. I have to kind of shake things up a little bit, be a little controversial, and I'm gonna tell you something
that's the perfect chair to do so.
This may not be very popular with most people, however, it is true. Actually, before I say this, I'm gonna tell you what I told the Oakland audience. Right? Look, if I offered you $100,000, no strings attached, no stipulations, I promise, no, it's a free $100,000. Would you take it?
Sure.
Cool. What if I threw it on the ground and kicked it to you? Say, here, Luke, take it. Would you still take it?
Probably.
Because you value 100K, right?
Sure.
Do you value the truth?
Yes.
So audience, don't worry about how I kick it to you then. If you value the truth.
Good setup.
So if we have a problem with it, we have to address one of two things. Either you don't like the truth, or, so with that said, the question is, are they shitting on the Constitution? Or is it that we fail to understand the Constitution? Because there's two, I almost want to say fatal, but two clauses in the Constitution that give a lot of leeway, right? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, all the legislative, right? The problem with this is We're talking about whether or not they violated the Constitution. And you're talking about a company or a corporation, right? They can have exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. This is the enclave clause, right? DC, right? Over such district not to exceed 10 square miles and all need for buildings and magazines and war, all this other good stuff, right? But the key was to practice exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. That's one.
District of Columbia.
Right.
Okay.
And now, with that said, Clause 3 mentions that they have plenary power, which means absolute with no limitations whatsoever. With no limitations whatsoever. When they have plenary power over that particular district, which they can exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. So when it comes to matters in that area or things relevant or in contact with that area, they have absolute power. See, the problem is that's in the Constitution. So are they shitting on the Constitution? Or does the Constitution make a way for something? This is why Benjamin Franklin said a republic, if you can keep it. See what I'm saying? Because that clause or those clauses are in there, it allows people to really straddle the fence. See, where they get away with it all is, and this is why it's key. Well, what does this have to do with interstate commerce? See, that's key. Yusavelle recently has been, not has been from my knowledge, but got into it. Kind of lives my dream a little bit. I kind of want to get into it with an attorney that thinks that this information is bogus, even though there's a lot of people that say bogus things relevant to the information. But he got to go up against this attorney back and forth for a while. And the dude didn't even realize, the attorney didn't even realize that he proved the number one point of the movement. Yusuf's typical disposition, right, is, from what I gather from it at least, is he's saying most attorneys, y'all are just certified plea bargainers, right? Y'all just get pleas all the time. So the lawyer came on and said, I actually won a case, because Yusuf says, y'all don't win cases, you just get pleas. He says, I won a case. But the case that he referenced that he won was like the holy grail of it, where somebody from the public was mentioning, yeah, but the problem is, I think it has something to do with somebody carrying a firearm within a certain distance of a school zone, right? You know what they had a problem with? Well, the question was, does this violate interstate commerce? Does this violate commerce? That's how they walk the fence. So is it that they're shitting on the Constitution, or have they made everything a commercial matter? Right. You're unbound by a thing the way that you're bound by it. So are you doing commerce? Do you have a minimum contact? You have to overstand this so that you can get into a different jurisdiction. Because under this jurisdiction, they have absolute power with no limitations, exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever.
So in 1871, when they created U.S. citizens, right, rather than people, it's we the people, not we the citizens, right?
That's an interesting one.
They incorporated the United States, located in the District of Columbia. So around that time, and you're more of a history buff than I am, but as I'm starting to piece the clues together, these benchmarks along the way, essentially they created a superimposed commercial law grid over this landmass called America, and then created a secondary class of people, calling them a U.S. citizen. And within that grid of commercial law for U.S. citizens, which are essentially employees of that District of Columbia, the Constitution doesn't apply in either of those realms. So they're not breaking it because they're operating within that realm.
They're operating within the Constitution.
Yeah. And those realms are allowed to exist via the Constitution.
The Constitution. There you go. You got it.
Whoa.
So misplaced anger. Right? People, they're violating the Constitution. See, this is how we never get out of anything, because we're
so
arguing moot points. So now we go into court and we make these arguments, and they're like, y'all don't understand anything. And now when somebody does come back and they know what they're talking about, sounding like the people that came before them, highly prejudicial. Oh, the sovereign citizens make these cases and they say things like that, and no court has ever ruled in favor of blah, 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 without even reading your actual paperwork, because they recognized a couple of words and said, yeah, that other guy from that other case said this one thing, but people don't understand the government. This is why I said I had to, if we value the truth, don't worry about how I kick it to you. So the truth of the matter is, they're not violating the Constitution. They're very much so operating within the Constitution, but they're also operating within commerce. That's the key. They're operating within commerce. When they talk about citizenship and things of that nature, remember, this is, how many constitutions would you say are relevant to America?
I would hope the state constitutions?
You already said it. 51. The answer is 51. Right? The people, it's like people don't remember they have a state constitution.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have to put something in the federal constitution about a class of citizen to create one that is a federal citizen. It's a federal citizen. Right? A citizen of the federal government, not a particular state.
That means legally you live in the District of Columbia.
You're subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Right. Okay.
Right? You're subject to the jurisdiction of the federal government if you are in fact a federal citizen.
Right.
So if you have rights and protections and privileges.
See, that's the 1871 sleight of hand, dude, is making everyone a federal citizen.
And what's crazy is Yusuf El mentions this too, so I'm going to parry when he says this. He says it real bluntly. White folks, I don't even know how y'all got conned into this because it was created for newly freed Negroes, so to speak, right? People disenfranchised Indians, but that's a whole other topic. But it was created because someone was trying to have the right to vote and to exercise some rights. They were saying, I've never been a slave, right? But the thing is, the Constitution in any of the states, the federal Constitution, it didn't mention that this class of person has any rights. However, they're not in the classification of a slave. So you know what? We have to give these people a status. New for the first time. That's why it's an amendment, right? We have to give these people a status. So here you go. But it's in the federal Constitution. It can only be a federal citizen.
Is this the 13th Amendment?
14th.
14th.
The 13th Amendment abolished slavery.
Okay.
People are emancipated, not freed. Emancipation does not mean freedom. It means changing jurisdiction thereof. But they're newly emancipated, but they didn't have rights or constitutional protections. So they said, we'll give you some, but we have to make you a citizen by
a federal citizen.
We have the federal Constitution can only make a federal citizen because it's separation of powers. They can't do anything and infringe on the state's power.
Okay.
You see how it gets more revealing when you understand that.
And so then they realized this is pretty sweet because now we just put all of these people that we've emancipated under the guise of freeing them under federal jurisdiction. This works out so well. Let's just put the entire country, every human man and woman living here,
here's the thing,
under that same jurisdiction with limited rights as a federal citizen.
They didn't do it. The people did.
God damn it.
That's why I used to say
we got to take responsibility.
That's why I used to say white folks, I don't even know how y'all got conned into that. It wasn't even for people of European descent. It wasn't even for them.
Right.
Right. So it's the people through minimum context. Yeah, I'll get a social security card. You don't have to get a social. You don't have to get it. Most of the things, if you look on SSA.gov, it'll literally tell you most of the things that people think they need a social for, you don't need one for. You don't. So you got a social. You decided to get a birth certificate and registered instead of an affidavit of nativity or some type of public record or put something in a family Bible or what have you. You decided to do that. Right? Unbeknownst to us, we were ignorant of the law. Again, you're unbound by a thing the way you're bound by it, so you have to overstand the system. You see? So you decided to do that. You decided to get a driver's license. You decided to work a job. You decided to live within a residential zone, a postal area. You decided to do that. Therefore, you created a minimum contact that implies federal citizenship, or you have these identifications to where you literally registered yourself to be a part of the federal citizenship.
Right. It's that thing that's really hard to grasp is that everything within the system that we consider to be so oppressive and unfair is at its core voluntary.
It is.
That's voluntary. I think many of us that start to awaken to this stuff get pissed not only at the system but at ourselves, or maybe our parents for going, dude, why'd you sign the birth certificate? Create a bond on me that I can't access that, right? And they're trading my birth certificate on the stock market. Everyone's making a bunch of money except me, the person who actually owns that trust. Right? It's crazy, dude.
That's an interesting one too. I don't know how controversial.
Go nuts, dude.
Well,
a few months ago, Alex Jones was sitting in that chair.
Okay,
so I don't think you could be any more controversial.
I'll burst some bubbles then. What trust? What trust?
Like most people with a pulse, I love the taste of coffee, but what I don't like is the jitters and crash that often come with it. So to solve this, I went looking for a morning drink that gives me lasting energy without those pesky side effects. Well, that's exactly what I found when I discovered the incredible non-DACA formula from Peak. Nandaka is made with fermented pu'er teas that give you slow-release caffeine for sustained energy while supporting a healthy gut at the same time. And the ceremonial-grade Peruvian cacao in Nandaka helps rev up your metabolism and makes the compounds in Nandaka even more bioavailable. And it goes without saying, to make something part of my morning routine, it's got to taste incredible too, and this one does. It's like a creamy, spiced hot chocolate. To make my morning drink, I throw 1 sachet in a 1.5 cups of hot water, froth it for a few seconds, and I'm good to go. And for a limited time, you can get 15% off Nandaka, plus a free rechargeable frother and cup over at peaklife.com/Luke. That's PIQUELIFE, peaklife.com/Luke. And by the way, Nandaka also comes loaded with a blend of highly concentrated functional mushrooms like chaga, reishi, cordyceps, and lion's mane. All these ingredients work together to relieve stress and improve your mood. Nandaka is an awesome morning ritual. In fact, I've got a cup sitting on my desk right now to power me through these promos. So to get your hands on some of this stuff, head over to peaklife.com/Luke and get 15% off Nandaka, plus your free frother and cup, all for a limited time.
The trust that the security, well, the negotiable instrument that is created by your birth certificate. My birth certificate on the bottom says banknote.
Banknote, yeah.
Right?
Mine
and I had someone look up the
document.
QSIP number and find the valuation of that. It's being traded, right? Yeah. So they're making money off that. It's been securitized.
This is a fact.
And I don't get access to those benefits.
This is a fact. Let me give you 2 things. One, a negotiable instrument is an unconditional promise or order to pay some certain amount of money fixed at some certain amount of money at some fixed or uncertain time if it's made payable to the order, payable to the bearer, payable at a definite time, and has no other conditions on the person doing the undertaking. Point is, does your birth certificate say pay to the order of anything?
No.
It's not a negotiable instrument. It is a security, but it's not a negotiable instrument. That's one. Okay. 2, but when we talk about a trust, that is another narrative that has to stop in the movement. So here's the thing, right? In order for that to be your trust, you would have to have granted some property in trust of another or for the benefit of another, right? As a baby, we granted nothing. People like to say you put your footprint on this, so that's like your signature and things of that nature. But who has custody of whatever this property would be, this trust res would be? That would be the mother, right? But that's a whole other type of topic, right? So one, the funds held in trust, maybe funds held in trust. I won't even dispute that. But is it your trust, or was it something being leveraged as collateral that represents your ability to do labor? Because how does the government make money? From the citizens, I'll say, specifically. Taxes, right? In order to pay taxes, you need a tax identification number, right? Social. In order to get a social, what do you need? A birth certificate, right? So your ability to do labor, to do work, and agreeing for you to be subject to a taxable system, right, is where the government gets their money. Now, them taking that piece of paper that represents that they may have a right in some funds that may be generated if this citizen, the person mentioned on this birth certificate, ends up doing something taxable, right? It's something that can be traded, something that they may say, hey, in modern money mechanics, they have a part in there that mentions, they give an example of how funds are creating a liability. They draw a liability on themselves. They say, let's say the Federal Reserve Bank of New York gives $10,000 to the trader in U.S. government securities, right? $10,000 of treasury bills. We're going to buy that from you, and we're going to give you a $10,000 credit at your Federal Reserve Bank specifically. So the Department of Commerce is how it's said. The Department of Commerce hits up from Vital Statistics, right? Hits up the Treasury, says, hey, we just registered a birth certificate. U.S. Treasury says, hey, Federal Reserve, I got this security over here. We want to do some trading. Right? Okay, cool. We'll give you $10K for this, but how does the government pay back the Federal Reserve? They owe a debt to the Federal Reserve. How do they pay them back? This is why Federal Reserve notes are a taxable event. They tax them, right? So I'm going to hold on to this bond. I'm going to hold on to this piece of paper that represents that I have some right or claim to this person if they do something, because they're going to live in America. They're going to be in the
future
system
of their production.
They're going to do work here.
Yeah.
They're going to. And because they have this now, that work can be taxable if they do such type of work.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's
I'm
what
going
gives
to get
value
a return
to
back.
the birth certificate.
But when we get into the trust aspect of it, right? When people mention, for instance, Sestake. One Sestake literally means, Sestake trust means beneficiary. It doesn't even mean beneficiary trust. The word is odd. English is very convoluted, but Sestake, even though it's French, but Sestake trust means beneficiary. So when people talk about a Sestake trust, what it's talking about is when somebody is, we've heard this before, lost or dead, presumed dead at sea or dead or lost at sea, sorry, all of their valuables, they can't regulate it. So we're going to assume control of these things until you come back, and then we give you all your stuff back, right? But here's the thing. I will call some romanticism, right? In this trust situation where people will then say, oh, well, they're looking at you like you're dead at sea. There's a lot of word magic that goes involved with it as far as the birthing procedure and the doctor.
The Jordan Maxwell stuff.
Very valid, like currency. There's a lot of word magic involved with it. But here's the thing. Is it that they're rendering you a dead entity or a lost entity? Is that what they're doing? And remember, who granted the trust res? Is it something that's there that even would be in a trust for you? Or is it something that we say what our mothers gave away our rights to what? The baby. People say like they're giving away the rights to the baby. Like the baby's the collateral. No, your ability to do work is in this piece of paper that represents the fact that we'll have some interest in your behaviors and practices within our jurisdiction is where the value would really come from. But when people mention, it's my trust that I have access to and y'all are making money off of my trust, here's the thing. If you're selling this glass of water and I buy it from you, it's mine. I bought it. I have the rights to it. If I sell it to another person, it's theirs. They have the rights to it. Do you really still have an interest in this thing that you sold or gave to me? You don't. You don't have an interest in it. You gave it to me. It's mine now. And I can do whatever it is I want to do with it, and I can sell it if I want to, right? But we have this idea that any security that's traded with our signature on it, we still have rights to some equity that's traded when those securities are further hypothecated. We think this, and I'll be honest with you, is very much so baseless. It's a baseless claim. It is without merit. It absolutely is. Now, it gets tricky when we talk about there's no equity without assignment. Now that gets tricky. Now that's the whole thing.
All right, before you get into that, let me run something by you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very interested in trust. That's like my shit right now. I'm just so
everybody.
I'm trying to learn, doing more shows about it. I think actually before this one comes out, I will have done one with this guy Landis White out of San Diego, who's like, he's the trust guy. It's like all he does. So I learned a lot.
Okay.
But going back to the birth certificate, and I'm going to just tell you my very rudimentary idea of it, and you tell me where I'm wrong here.
No problem.
So a trust, at its basis, is a contract between two parties for the benefit of a third.
Yes, sir.
We agree on that? I got that right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So the way I think of, I'm born, a birth certificate is created, right? It's a representation of a real person, me, the baby boy, but it's a fictitious person in the sense that it's just a document that's representative of something that's living, but it's not the living thing. So I think of baby boy Luke is born. I'm the settler or grantor of that trust. I'm the beneficiary of that trust who's supposed to get the benefits from that event. And the U.S. Attorney General is the trustee, which you could just call the state, is the one who's supposed to administer that trust for my benefit. That seems like a bad deal, where if, one could go back, as is the case in like a secured party creditor, holder in due course sort of situation, wherein you were the grantor. You now take over the position of trustee by essentially firing the U.S. Attorney General because they're doing a horrible job at their duties, and then name a beneficiary. Seems like a better way to go than how it was originally set up. What's your take on that? And where do I have it right or wrong?
I got you. So it is interesting. I like what you said is correct, but I would tell you it's correct in a manner that isn't specified though, but it is correct.
Okay.
You would be granting, if we want to say the baby put a signature on that, mark of the individual, put his footprint on it, right? Even though they're not of legal age, right, to give any such consent, it would be the mother doing it. So on that end, you couldn't be the settler. But let's say we want to take the baby put his signature on it by way of footprint. Fine, let's take that. You would be giving some value, right, on behalf of another, because when you get citizenship, you get rights, privileges, and immunities and protections of that government. See, that's your benefit. And you gave them some value by way of, I'm going to be within your jurisdiction and do something that is also in consideration or value of you. So I will pay taxes. I'll live within this particular municipality and do whatever it is. I may serve the military or whatever it is. I'm going to do something to serve my country, right? So by way of being a citizen, in exchange, I'm going to get protections from the citizens. So someone can't come over and just violate me from another country. You're going to have to see my country first. I can take advantage of your ease of travel or this or that, right? In exchange, I'm going to give you, right, what it is that you want to facilitate some type of transaction, commerce, stimulate the economy because I'm going to participate in it or what have you. But I would not say what you gave, because think about even the nature of what I just said. I would not say, again, you can't be the settler because you didn't give the value really itself. It would be your mother. But again, let's say we take the footprint as is. It wouldn't be that you gave the value to the state and they're going to facilitate what they're going to facilitate for your business as is. Because here's the thing. Don't taxpayers have a liability? See, this trust thing gets deep. If they have a liability, who has liability in a trust? The trustee. So is the state trustee or are you the trustee? Now, it's two different ledgers, right? Private side of the ledger, like we like to say, right? But it's two different ledgers going on. So you can be a co-trustee and a co-beneficiary because who also benefits from you being a citizen? You do and the government does. They get a taxpayer. They get somebody to stimulate the economy, to operate within the military, to do whatever it is that they got to do. Work a job to produce value, to make products that they can export, whatever it is. So you get a benefit from you being a citizen. They get a benefit from you being a citizen. You have a duty and responsibility. They have a duty and responsibility to serve the people. So it's a co-trustee, co-beneficiary disposition going on. Balance. You can't escape balance. You can't escape natural laws.
So what if that trustee in that trust relationship that I described is not doing their fiduciary duties and you want to remove them from their position and you as the living man or woman want to become the trustee and in fact do so?
So the nature of this trust is one more in operation and not necessarily in actual entity itself, right? Thinking about the situation that you described and even the one that I described as well. Who would you go take that trust agreement to and adjudicate a matter on? The government? The trustee itself? You could. But what would then be the cause of action? What would be the complaint? Hey, the government breached their fiduciary duty to me. So here's the thing. Because trusts have the sole right to have matters adjudicated in a court of equity. In a court of equity. So what court are you going to go to say that the government breached their fiduciary duty? When you do that, they're going to say, okay, cool, give me evidence of this person's fiduciary duty. What then do we say? I have a birth certificate. What does that tell them? You can explain that there's a trust, there's a nature of a trust going on. You could explain, well, a definition of fiduciary duty is this. The government does have a fiduciary duty to me. You can explain everything I just mentioned, that they do get value from me by way of me doing X, Y, Z. So now the conversation, even if you wanted to raise that point, see, now the conversation is, what duty did they breach? Because I see the duties of the government because you didn't make a particular agreement specific to you. Their duty is that which is outlined in the Constitution. So now it goes back to, did they violate the Constitution? So it's not so much a question of, I want to remove you from the trustee, because that means remove the government from their seat of government, because they don't have a particular agreement with you and your mother exclusive to y'all. That's just operation of the government.
How about this? What if we go in and collapse that original trust associated with the all caps name and the birth certificate, nullify it, create a new trust for the all caps name, as the grantor and you being the trustee and a third party named beneficiary?
I would have to say, because in the spirit of being practical, well, how is it that we would do that? How would you collapse that? What you would have to do is rescind citizenship effectively. But now we're wanting to get back into a contract with the government. Well, how do you do that if you rescinded your citizenship? Re-get citizenship? Well, that's going to come with all the same documentations and agreements for minimum contacts as they are. So in theory, it sounds great. But in practice, we have to, being practical, it wouldn't be something that you're able to do unless you're going to, and we're getting to the point I wanted to talk about, right, is completely divorce yourself from the jurisdiction. So then when you erect your own entity within your own jurisdiction, that's when you can begin to do that. That's when you can create a situation to where you say, I'm going to give this body politic or this government some interest and I'm going to serve it as a national of this body politic, right? I'm going to serve that. That's the consideration, right? And it can be within the governing document or whatever document creates that government, that they will have the fiduciary duty to the people to do X, Y, Z. And now, again, never going to be something exclusive to you because you're not going to have a nation of one. Or, I mean, the Pope does. That's a whole other thing. But you're not going to have a nation of one. So it's going to say, we like-minded people got together and said, you all are going to serve us this way, and we're going to serve our government, the collective interest of every single person that I call my neighbor now. We're going to serve it that way, and this will be our benefit. So the key is divorce the jurisdiction. See, when we talk about collapsing the trust and making a new one, we're talking about for the purposes of removing a trustee whom we have a disposition of as the trustee being the state. What you're talking about is collapsing your relationship with the state, which means you're going to revoke or rescind your citizenship.
Yeah, like revoking and revesting title.
But you can revest it back into them. You have to do it in your own body
shit.
policy.
Yeah, your own new irrevocable complex trust.
Your own shit.
It's a non-statutory trust, not having anything to do with that.
So you either need to go, but see, it gets interesting then when we talk about that, because if you went to another nation, and it's a nation that you all built, it can be statutory, because the statutory means, let's say all of us here in this room are the legislative branch. Let's say we service 50 other people. We're going to make a law. It's going to be a statute, but it's actually the will of the people. It's actually going to be that. So it could be statutory then, right? Or if we wanted to make a judiciary branch and adjudicate on some matter, then it can be common law then, or it can be private equity, or it can be a religious disposition, or whatever it is that it's going to be. Right. But the key is it has to be under a different body of people. Right. So there's no divesting and then reinvesting title in the same nation that you rescinded your citizenship from. You're going to have to leave them, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the truth. That's a God honest truth.
Electromagnetic frequencies are one of the most toxic elements in our living and work environments. Now, most people just resign themselves to accepting them and the consequences they bring just to use the modern technology upon which we've come to depend. But after a very difficult 3-year period of hell when I was living directly under 2 cell towers, I could simply not accept that position any longer. Because the effects of EMF are cumulative, even if you're not yet experiencing the full-on nightmare I was, I'm talking vertigo, sleeplessness, and migraines for starters, you owe it to yourself to mitigate the potential future harm of EMF. And by far one of the best ways I've found to do that is by using something called a blue shield. It works like this. Blue shield devices emit biologically coherent frequencies that are essentially loud enough to compete against the incoherent, non-native EMF fields produced by things like cell towers and Wi-Fi. And the body preferentially entrains with those frequencies via sympathetic resonance. And of course, your technology still works, while the blue shield device supports your well-being at a cellular level. And this is, of course, a lot more convenient than living your life in a cave or a Faraday cage. And with a gang of choices to fit your budget and lifestyle, Blue Shield is a no-brainer. To check them out, just visit blueshield-us.com. That's BLUSHIELD, blueshield-us.com, and use the code Luke to save 10%. Again, check out all your EMF protection options over at blueshield-us.com. And again, that code is Luke.
Well, that brings us to a couple next broad topics. And, as I mentioned earlier, and you're well aware, there's a lot of people now kind of waking up to law being the key out of this cage.
Right.
And so this idea of all the different kind of processes of status correction, right? Some people are very it's nationality based. Some people are doing it, all kinds of different ways. And everyone, of course, in the space, at least all the leaders kind of think their way is the best way and the only way, which is
they do.
kind of part of the human condition. But I think the positive thing is many people are becoming interested in this and people are making progress, and I'm sure some people are making mistakes and there's not like a perfect way out of the mess that we got ourselves into.
There you go.
To our compliance and acquiescence. But what's your, what's your kind of theory or take on this idea of status correction of, removing ourselves from the system? I know Brother Truth has like a whole kind of tribal angle that I don't fully understand. It's like everyone's doing things that seem to work. And I'm, finding my way through it all. But what's your take on that piece?
So let's be very literal, right? A status correction. That means somebody is wearing a particular status that they believe to be incorrect. So then you go and correct that status. What do we talk about? When people mention, I want to do my status correction, what they're typically referring to is, I don't want to be viewed as a 14th Amendment citizen. I don't want to be viewed as a federal citizen. So what is it that you would be correcting? This idea that you're a federal citizen? Okay. Well, what do you have on the record that suggests that you are a federal citizen? Because when people do the paperwork, they talk about it in the status correction process. You can send as many affidavits as you want, unrebutted. You can make as many newspaper ads, put as many ads out in the paper as you want and mention, hey, I'm this person, XYZ. Let's say that's all fine and dandy. Do you still possess a minimum contact? Are you still in a residence? Do you still have a social security number? Are you still using the social security number? Are you still receiving income that's a taxable event? What is it that you're doing? Because you can correct. Let's go to the Bible, right? In Timothy, I wish you were either hot or cold, but since you are lukewarm, I have spit you out my mouth. That's the Bible verse about straddling the fence. You're going to be public or you're going to be private, but you can't be both because now you'll get no remedy. See, there's remedies for private concerns. There's remedies for public concerns, but you muddying the waters or straddling the fence, we don't know what you are. There's no remedy for you at all because you're either under this jurisdiction or that jurisdiction. There is no muddying the jurisdiction. There's no jurisdiction for common middle ground. You're private or you're public. So when it comes to status correction, when people are mentioning, hey, I want the government not to view me as XYZ, the claws of the government are so far into the activities of your life. I will tell you, there's not really a way, I would say practically, to correct your status as it relates to showing the government I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen unless you completely stop using the social security number. Shout out Yusaville, he mentions that. Unless you completely stop using those minimum contacts, that's why America is set up for you to win off a business. Operate from your business address, get a business mailbox, if you're going to operate within America because it's a business, right? But stop putting your social on anything, stop putting your name on anything, own nothing, control everything. That's the point. So it's not so much about correcting a status, because you can do the passport process, right? You can mention, hey, I'm a U.S. national, not a U.S. citizen. You can do that. That's perfectly fine. And I agree with doing that. But when you put that paperwork in, and what do you have? You have paperwork that's evidence that you're a U.S. national, but you got a bunch of other documents that's evidence that you're a U.S. citizen. You're still using a social. Forget that you have one, that's fine. But if you keep using it, that's problematic. You say you're not subject to the federal jurisdiction, right? To the federal government's jurisdiction, yet you have a zip code attached to your name. And that's a implied contract, right? It's consent through behavior. I'm going to use your system so that I can get mail. I'm going to live in your zone attached to my name. Not this is where my business does business, though. I'm going to live here. So you got a bunch of paperwork that says I'm not a U.S. citizen and a bunch of paperwork that says you are. Go back to the Bible. God said, I wish you were either hot or cold, but since you're lukewarm, I have spit you out of my mouth. You don't get any remedy for me. I wish you were this or that, but you're neither. I don't have nothing for you. So when it comes to status correction, understanding law first and foremost, and then what you mentioned with, let's say, Brother Truth, talking about a tribal disposition, I would say that is one of the most useful status corrections for people that are indigenous Aboriginal people, because the only status that is not a correct one, and when I say this, I don't mean it's a status that's, other statuses are incorrect as in they don't exist or they're flawed. I'm saying most people, when they say my status is wrong, they're talking about a status that does actually give powers a valid status, but they're saying I'm not that, right? But when people elect to be Black or African American, that's the only one that is that denationalizes a people. If you look at a government form, an ethnicity and race form, we don't even got to read all of them, but every single one: Asian, American Indian and Native Alaskan, Pacific Islander, white, it's another one, whichever other ones, right, there are. They'll say any person having their origins in the original peoples of some nation. Any person having their origins in any of the original people of some nation. What Black and African American says is any person having their origins in any of the Black racial groups. You don't descend from any original people.
Wow.
The original man doesn't descend from any original people.
That's weird.
You have no nation, so you're stateless, but not really, because they created a 14th Amendment. So now you have a state. So that's the only one that's an incorrect status as far as being a national is concerned. But whites, Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, all of those are people that identify with a nation, so the world can do business amongst nations, can do business amongst other nations.
Always tripped me out about those is they always have not Hispanic.
Not Hispanic.
What's that all about?
Hispanic and Latino is another I won't say disenfranchised, another denationalized status. That's why if you look at the race and ethnicity form, SF 181, and at the top it'll say, are you Latino or Hispanic? And then at the bottom, it has a bunch of categories of what it means to be American Indian, white, Asian, Pacific Islander, Black or African American, and what have you, right? So those are honestly the only statuses I think need correction. The other ones are saying I don't belong in this status, because a U.S. citizen is not a stateless person. However, you may not elect to be a U.S. citizen, but you can't say I'm not a U.S. citizen. You can. That's why status correction would be appropriate, that terminology, because you're saying I'm going to correct that and tell you all I'm a U.S. national. But you better move like a U.S. national. You better move like somebody who is not subject to the jurisdiction of the federal. Let me be careful with my words. Let me not say subject to the jurisdiction of the federal government, because you would still want to leverage protections and privileges of them, because if you're in some other some other country in the world, you're going to want some federal government assistance if you have to go to an embassy or something like that. So you don't want to be without a nation. You don't want to be without a nation, and a nation that can serve you or do things for you, right? But at the same time, I understand what people mean when they say, I don't want to be viewed as somebody who has partial rights. But in reality, it's a dual citizenship. Nobody is just a U.S. citizen. You're always going to be a dual citizen specifically. So you're not without that. See what I'm saying? So it's an interesting thing.
I mean, all this stuff, dude, makes my head swim. I'm just like trying to keep up and learn as much as I can. It's so, I mean, you do a great job of breaking it down, as do many other people in this space, but it's so complex. I mean, there's so much to it. And the interesting thing about law to me is it's unique in that it's so heavy on the side of unlearning. Right? There's a lot of shit you might want. I want to learn how to play guitar. Okay. Yeah. It's a lot of work. If you want to become a proficient musician, there's a lot of things that you don't know that you need to know. But if you had to learn how to play guitar by being Jimi Hendrix your whole life, and then unlearning every single note you ever knew,
it gets difficult.
That's a whole different animal.
Competent people at the forefront. That's why I love what James Madison said. There won't always be enlightened people at the helm of government. Now, I have a huge, immense amount of reverence and respect for anybody who is bold enough to teach in this movement. However, from the bottom of my heart, this is just a genuine, honest concern. It comes from a place of love. Just because people have something to say doesn't necessarily mean that they should be teachers. This is no, I'm not spiting anyone, but people can lead people into misinformation that causes a lot of problems. So what my good brother mentions, right, we call it sound right reasoning. It's 360 and 720 back again, right? Sound right reasoning. all the way around, and then 720 back again, right? But I like what he mentions. He says, I said it one time, he doubled down on it. I like the way he appropriated the idea. It's things are not easy, but they are simple. So when we talk about unlearning, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to address a lot of points, but it is simple. It's not difficult, especially when you go back to understanding the roots of natural law. Fairness, what's fair? And how does everything else spawn from that? You see what I'm saying? So it's you're right and exact when you mention there's a lot of unlearning to do. And it is difficult to do, but when you have such study groups and you have competent people who are void, I will say, of emotionalism or what I call romanticizing information, right? When you can get to the facts without bias, I say in order to validly qualify information, it's not enough for me to prove my point. I have to debunk the antithesis. So if you have an idea of something and I disagree with the idea, I must now try my hardest to qualify your idea. And if I can't, or I fail doing that, and I'm able to identify the defect as to why I can't do that, this gives me more credence and right to uphold whatever my disposition was. It's not enough. You can't be one-sided. It's not enough to prove when people say there's your side, my side, and the truth, or two sides to every story, and you have to address every single variable. You can't leave not one thing unaccounted for because what's called a fatal defect, I like to say, right? One fatal defect can get rid of the whole idea. Everything can, in nuclear engineering, I was a nuclear engineer, nuclear chemist, right? Before
really?
Yeah. Okay. So in the nuclear propulsion
so you didn't just get smart 6 months ago.
Okay. I would like to think I've
got it.
been
Okay.
that majority of my life. But there's something they call an error carried forward, where we wouldn't get the entire, because they care about knowledge and competence, right? You wouldn't get zero credit for the entire question if you got it wrong. It's if you had, unless there was they would call it a egregious or a gross. It would be a gross concept error. Then you get a lot of points off of that question. But if it wasn't a gross concept error and you got something correct, but one thing was incorrect, but you carried the rest of the thought progression on correctly, meaning it shows understanding, you might only get 1 point off the question. So you have to address every single thing and unpack every single thing because you may misstep and end up at the wrong destination. Right? You can put in the coordinates of GPS, but if you miss a turn, you're not going to end up where you're supposed to go. Even though you might, let's say you put in the wrong address. I'll say that. But your intent was to go somewhere different. And you follow the steps verbatim, step by step, direction by direction, turn by turn. You don't end up with the desired result because you took the wrong path because maybe you didn't go back. You weren't willing to unpack all of the directions and say, well, wait a minute. The zip code was this. It was Lake Way, not Lake City. Oh, one defect can completely derail your path. So it does take a lot of scholarship. It does take you to be studious. It absolutely does.
I mean, I've been studying my ass off for the past year, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface.
You have to, when you really know the core, because I'll tell you, right, I'm not formally educated in most of the topics that I teach on and my business is now. I'm not formally educated on any of it. Right? My partner isn't formally educated on these things. He was groomed by some attorneys and legal professionals, but he wasn't formally educated. Yes, sir. Right? He wasn't formally educated. Most competent person in law, I think, that I know. Right? So you have to be guided by sound right reasoning. And that really is where lies the difficulty in this movement, is because everybody believes what they're saying is correct. And to people who don't know, to neophytes, they hear something that they've never heard of before. And I say this a lot too, right? There's a difference between something that makes sense and making sense of something. So you ever took a test like back in school and you swore up and down an answer was right, and then you get your paper back and it was wrong, but you swore it was right? It's not because you intentionally put on the wrong answer. You made sense of something that wasn't correct, but in reality, it didn't actually make sense. So people make sense of something that doesn't actually make sense. For people that are none the wiser, they hear it and they can hear a logical thought progression, but there was an error carried forward. They were incorrect in their foundation, so they carried that error forward. So then they begin to believe this or study this way, and I get it. So many people have different things. They come back and say, well, wait a minute. Oh, this is the right method? Oh, no. Oh, this is the right method? Oh, no. Oh, this is the right method? And now everybody's studying a whole bunch of different things, but that's why you teach core principles. That's what you have to teach, because there's nothing new under the sun. It all follows natural law, and the period, point blank, it's all accounting. whether we're talking about spirituality, whether we're talking about, again, relationships, anything. It's accounting and it's a credit game. It's bookkeeping, it's accounting. That's all of this is when we talk about commerce is concerned, right? But if you address that, you can't say, I don't do any commerce, I do equity. I'll be honest with you. That is an extremely unintelligent thought. Why is that an extremely unintelligent thought? Because commerce is you doing business with your fellow man. The very definition of equity is fair dealings, truth, justice, morality, something based in morality and fair dealings with your fellow man. How do men deal with men? They trade. Right? So equity, when you're talking about giving somebody something of value or doing anything contract-wise, that's still commerce. It's not different. It's not a different jurisdiction. It's not a thing. Commerce is the practice of trade, exchange. So when we talk about give unto others as you give and it'll be given back unto you, that's an equitable principle. Yeah, it's also commerce, right? I only teach consumer law. Well, that's just a body of laws that Congress made to protect consumers against unfair lending practices and things of that nature. But it's still commerce. Still, talk about trust law. When you fund the trust of give consideration or what have you, right? When you're talking about the laws dealing with simple contracts or estoppel and XYZ, still has some commerce involved. There's nothing new under the sun because what is commerce? It's trade. That's all.
Tell us about your court competence course, debt discharge course, commerce study group. We got links here we're going to put in the show notes. They each have their own one, so I'm not going to read them out. But as you describe them, people know if you get in there, you can use the code Luke and get $250 off the first two and $50 off the last one. But I haven't looked into these yet. And I feel like I need to take them. The first one, court competency. Now, I've seen you and Jay when we were
mock trials,
we did the
right?
Brother Truth event.
Mock
you guys do the mock trials, and I'm just sitting there like, dude, I would be annihilated because I'm like answering the question for the actor, the participant, and I'm just like, oh, got it wrong. And I think with the court thing, it's like we all think, well, that's never going to happen to me. Like I stay out of trouble. I'm never going to end up in court. And it's like, dude. And then you got people that are like, I'm going to leave the system. Well,
you probably want some declaratory judgment or something, public acknowledgement or something.
You probably want to know a little bit about court
probably.
If you're going to buck up against the machine. But anyway, tell us about the ways that you inspire and teach people here because I'm curious about it myself.
Okay, so let's start with courtroom competence.
Okay,
all right. We say this up. Am I allowed to use profanity?
Yeah,
okay.
I think I already did. I called you a smart fucker earlier.
So we say stop making shitty case law. Stop. If you don't do anything else in this movement, stop making shitty case law. If you feel like somebody violated your rights, where are you going to go to get your remedy? Court. If you're in this movement, you're not dodging court, period. Or you just like to read things and not apply it. One of the two is a fact. But you're going to court. So we teach the arts and sciences of litigation. Now, what's particularly special about this courtroom competence course is it's very rare that we have somebody from the legal profession teaching us in this movement, teaching us how they think, not romanticizing information, not thinking it's a kangaroo court or it's XYZ like we talked about earlier in this discourse, right? They're not violating the Constitution. They're walking a little line that they made for themselves to do what they do, right? And I'm gonna say this is real quick. We won't go into it, but you mentioned something earlier about nobody's doing their job because they don't really, there are people behind the scenes that do it. Yeah, bankers. It's bankers. So my point is...
Isn't a courtroom really just a bank?
It literally means...
At the end of the day?
It's bank.
Okay. That's what it seems like.
They have a CRIS, court registry investment system. They're trading securities, whole other thing, right? But it's bankers that run everything anyway. So they're walking that line that they can go and put everything in commerce. So that's what takes place there, right? But what's brilliant about this is he comes and was groomed by legal professionals. He's worked under administrative law judges. So he's not romanticizing information saying it's a kangaroo court. It's not an Article I court. People say that it's an Article I court. It's not an Article III court for a traffic ticket. Well, the weirdness about that is it's not a federal case, a traffic ticket. It's state. So when you say Article I, Article III and Article III of what? What they're referring to is the federal Constitution. You're in a state court, dude. Article I is not the legislative branch in your state. Article 3 may not be the judicial branch in your state. Like in Texas, it's Article 5. Article 3 is a legislative and Article 5. So if you were to say it's not an Article 3 court at a legislative body or administrative office, it kind of sounds stupid because what erected that court was the state constitution. And that is Article 3. So what you meant to say was it's not this is a legislative court. It's not, you're acting ministerially, not judicially, but see, you don't understand this. So my point is, this teacher isn't so romanticized about what's going on with the court system, but he's not so indoctrinated that he can't see clearly and understand certain questions. So we have the privilege, I'll say the honor, right? The gift of having a legal professional assist with these. So these mock trials aren't random. It's not somebody answering what they think the judge is going to say. It's somebody that worked under administrative law judges for years.
I got that sense. I also got the sense that showing up to court and trying to tell the judge that, you don't have jurisdiction. I'm a living man. I'm not that all caps name.
No one said you weren't.
How the judge and his homies are going to be in his quarters laughing their asses off. We got another one. Another sovereign citizen. Here we go.
Sovereign citizen, guys. Yeah. So
I mean, to me, if I was in a court situation, I would just, rather go in and just be like, cool, jurisdiction, take what's coming to me, rather than embarrass myself and not really be able to stand on my,
that's why we have
on the knowledge that I have.
That's why we have the course, because what is the job of a court when they're adjudicating a matter? Get to the relevant facts, the material facts. Your status is only in question if you're questioning, this is what people say challenge, questioning subject matter jurisdiction or even personal jurisdiction, which is kind of be stupid because you wouldn't be in court anyway if they didn't have personal jurisdiction, because you got a summons, which means they have a contact, period. So when you're questioning subject matter jurisdiction, so we teach about the arts of litigation. When we do the mock trials, it's not random and it's not exactly like a court session will go, because unless you're advanced enough to do it, but because we have to teach you as well, right? So things like fatal defects, essential elements, right? Things that matter, how to argue, even something from the beginning of, because we have workshops as well, right? But even something that comes from which court are you even going to sue in? You want to be proactive, not reactive. So if you want to sue somebody and get your remedy, well, what court do you decide to go in? Before you even get into any litigation, is the court that you're petitioning, can they even grant you what you want to get? Right? And if they can't, maybe you wanted to do something in the private before you even take it to court. So we teach the arts and sciences of litigation, how to actually litigate so you don't go in there sounding crazy, and we have a legal professional to do it. I myself am, I would say, fairly proficient or competent in the matters in which we speak about. So like what we talked about at our mock trial, right? Accord and satisfaction. Well, we get into what accord and satisfaction is. We get into what the court's disposition about accord and satisfaction is. We get into the essential elements. When we talk about breach of duty, it's not about how I feel about this or what I think I was owed and what I didn't get. No, that's not what it's about. It's about the court has this remedy or can award this restitution or remedy and these damages, but you need to prove X, Y, Z. This is what is relevant. And it's not easy, but it is simple. What's a proper objection? When is an objection even appropriate, right? What is evidence? So we would even do mock trials where we'll have, let's say it's for a citation. We'll have an arraignment, and then we'll move to an evidentiary hearing. And at an evidentiary hearing, people are still trying to talk about what happened and prove their case. You will hear him mention in a lot of mock trials, because we offer those recordings on mock trials too, right? Where he'll mention, well, you will certainly, and people don't know why he says it, but, well, you will certainly have your opportunity for trial when you want, but right here, we're here to get to the evidence. Do you want to object to some evidence they're putting in? Would you like to submit some evidence of your own so that when we get to the trial, we can look at the evidence and everybody has a fair chance to review each other's evidence. All right. So things like that we don't think about because we want to beat our chest and say, I'm a living, breathing man. That's fine. No one said you weren't. That's immaterial. We're here to talk about, you said you were damaged. And were you damaged because you're a living, breathing man? Maybe it's relevant, but typically no. So the courtroom competence course deals with the sciences and arts of litigation. It's always live and interactive. That's the key for all of my courses. I want everybody to know that. It's live and interactive. Why? Because as the learned person, what we talked about with everybody having a bunch of different processes, right? I can't ask you probing questions to discern whether or not you actually understood what I said. So I may say something and maybe you made sense of it and it didn't relate to the whole topic. If it's pre-recorded, I can't ask you, Luke, did you understand it? Yeah, I think I did. Now what I do is, now I have to ask you a question. I give this example, right? 2 + 2 is what?
4.
What's 2 times 2?
4.
4, right? So
You made me think there for a second. Like,
not a
don't
trick,
do,
right?
Don't
Not
do
a trick.
math on me, bro.
not a trick, right? So if all day, every
Next
day,
he's going to get into spelling. We're really going to head down a path I don't want to go down.
so check me out, right? If 2 plus 2 is 4, we do arithmetic all the time, right? We did that type of arithmetic, and then we advance to multiplication. And you say 2 times 2 is 4. Maybe for whatever reason, you drew a simile to, which there is one, but to multiplication and addition, you thought that it's just like adding. But it's circumstantial because 2 plus 2 is 4. It just so happens to be that 2 times 2 is 4 because what multiplication is. So now when you tell me 4, my job is not to say, good job, Luke, is 4. My job is to ask you what 3 times 3 is. And if you tell me 6, I know we have a problem because you didn't actually understand multiplication. You were mimicking 2 plus 2 and 2 times 2 being 4. So if you know 3 plus 3 is 6, because all we've done is addition so far, how do I know that you understand what multiplication is? I have to ask you what 3 times 3 is. So I know if you tell me 6, we have a problem. I can't do that on a pre-recorded video. So you will never walk out of my class or exit my class or curriculum without sound right reasoning and understanding. So everything's live first and foremost. So those mock trials and recordings that you get, of course, we do replay videos and makeup days. If you can't catch it live, of course, you'll always get an opportunity to attend class, right? But that's what the courtroom competence course is about, navigating the court system, whether that's a defendant, a plaintiff, an arbitrary filing, you want to get a declaratory judgment, whatever it is, we go through the rules, the court rules. We go through the sciences behind why they have rules. We go over how you interface with the judge, prosecuting attorney, and even practical things. Like if it's something like this, you could probably call the prosecuting office and do X, Y, Z. Things as simple as that. You don't got to beat your chest all the time about how you're sovereign and you got rights. You don't have to do that. It's a much easier way through, I assure you. Right? So that's the courtroom competence course. The debt discharge course is the fundamental science of everything. See, we don't talk about, I have the class elect a process that they want to go over, but one, at their root, they're all the same. I'm going to teach you the arts behind, you can make up your own. I've made up several myself that have been successful. I've made up my own process. I've made it up before.
I mean, nowadays it sounds like these would go hand in hand because from what I understand, and maybe there's probably people listening that don't know what debt discharge even means, so maybe you could define that, but because people are becoming more educated about the fraudulent nature of our financial system and currency versus money and so on, from what I hear, the buzz is that, these companies, even though they're committing fraud with our acquiescence, they're not rolling over like they used to and just, you sent it this little letter, we'll balance it out. You accepted it? Cool. Like that's not happening. So it seems like if you're serious about discharge, that it's going to lead to litigation.
Litigation.
Right?
Either this is what we said, or what I've said recently, right? Let's take, and this isn't an actual percentage, right? I didn't do the math on this, but let's say out of 10 instances, maybe 1 time your initial process goes through. Cool. 2 times out of 10, if you leverage sciences through the IRS, you can get something taken care of, but you have to wait on the IRS. Because the IRS isn't an enforcement agency that makes people balance books out the gate. No, they're going to see who filed something. And then when the company files something, they say, hey, maybe this doesn't align with this. Y'all need to do whatever y'all got to do, cancel this out or whatever. But you're going to have to wait on the company to do their next tax estimate or remittance. And then you wait on the IRS for that company to do what they got to do. So that's going to take time. But if you're trying to discharge a debt, you probably don't have too much time to waste or wait on anything. And then maybe you want to wait that amount of time, but in that time, you could have went to court and got your remedy. So that's 2 out of 10 times. 7 out of 10 times, you're going to court. Mainly because of the people that preceded us who probably had a good heart and good intentions, but were pumping misinformation accidentally, right? They made sense of something that didn't actually make sense, right? Picking up narrative, romanticizing. So because that's happened so often through the court, you may not actually understand how to navigate court. But 7 out of 10 times, you're going to court. And they don't roll over, so to speak, like they used to, because if they got a slew of people that are trying to set off mortgages out the gate and it was all successful, you will crash the entire system, right? So no, it doesn't just work. I don't even like saying work because what it means is you didn't work if your process didn't work because they're all effectively in essence the same. But they may just ignore it. Right? They may put something in place that says our policy is that we have to recognize this. So I like what my partner says, right? You got rights? Okay, come show me. So they may ignore your correspondence and say, anyway, or it looks like what those other guys tried to do and messed up in court, so we don't even respect it now. So that's another reason as to why it isn't really respected initially these days. So to your point, right? Yeah, you're going to court. You're going. So the debt discharge and courtroom competence courses actually do go hand in hand. But there are some things you can do to satisfy that obligation without going to court by way of monetizing some instruments, kind of what we spoke about a little bit earlier as far as collateralizing some things and being able to put something on a particular exchange, get some credits on the book, write them a check with the collateral, whether that be a bond or security that you yield or hold some value in, whether you want to collateralize it with something else, whether you want to leverage a piece of collateral that maybe you have insured, it gets deep. But there are some things you can do debt discharge wise without going to court, but you need to know the sciences behind it because that's what you're going to put in your petition, or that's what you're going to put in a affirmative defense or your court correspondence. That's what you're going to put in there is what you've done, because you're talking about in court, how were you aggrieved? How were you damaged? Well, I was damaged because they didn't do this when I did that. But you need both. Honestly, you need both. You need to understand the sciences of your private administrative process so that you can properly articulate that in court, the relevant parts. And then you need to understand the courtroom competence, right? So that you can navigate it correctly. Because what you don't want to do is articulate something bogus correctly through court. So you can navigate the court correctly, but your private admin process was BS. It was meaningless or frivolous, or because maybe you didn't even understand. Maybe it was correct, but you didn't understand it. And because you didn't understand it, you didn't allege the proper action or make the better points or support or bring supporting evidence to make sure that the judge, what he mentions a lot, I like this, give the judge a place to hang his hat. Because the judge don't want to get his case remanded or her case remanded and kick back down and have his peers laughing at him, his golf buddies and stuff like that, saying, man, how did you, so you definitely need both.
Do you think some of the resistance to discharge is because or do you think that they sometimes are settling out of court so they're not creating precedent?
Do I think?
If I was, Chase Bank or whatever, and people started proving my fraud, that I'm, securitizing their debt instruments, I don't want the public to know about that. So if you come to me as an educated consumer, of course, all these words have deeper meanings, but say you do a discharge against me as Chase Bank, and you're right, and I know you're right, and you know your shit, and I know you're going to win. If it were to go to court, I'm just going to be like, cool, here's $100,000. Let's pretend like this never happened. Because if you do it and it's on record, then any other schmo that sees that record can just copy what you did, right? That case law.
They will cite the case law. See, they're supposed to do this. They didn't. Right. And this last time when Chase was up, you see what I'm saying? So it's, I would say this. I have several students, not abundance, but I have several students that have signed NDAs from going to court with certain credit card companies and financial institutions where they said, okay, we'll do XYZ for you, but you got to shut up.
Right.
I obviously won't name the institution. It's NDA, right? So it's quiet about that. But when you say, do I think? I know. Oh, I know. Yeah. That's what because for what you just said, I don't want this legal precedence. I don't want to make a precedence out of this.
Right.
I don't want this on the record. Absolutely not. No. So because it will collapse the system, right? So they're saying, let's give this guy what he wants, kick him out the way. But maybe they'll put a stipulation and they're like, but you can't bank with us anymore because we don't want you doing this all the time. Fine, whatever, cool.
And then what's the Commerce Study Group?
The study group is we meet 3 times a week, right? I rotate subject matters, right? So we do UCC, SPC science, scholarship around it too, not just random narrative. I qualify every single point that I'm making, or we leave it pending, period. So we go UCC, SPC science, constitutional science, which in our body politic that we're forming right now, we're actually going to build the legislative branch article of our constitution together. So constitutional science, court competence, as far as mock trials. And if one of our own in the study group has a court case coming up, regardless of the subject matter, we may do a mock trial and assist with that. We do IRS document science, and we do debt discharge. And I rotate between those subjects like probably we'll stay on one for like maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. But we meet 2 times a week, have pre-call, post-call Q&As, right? We get into esoteric sciences and things. We do all, but we meet every week.
Wow.
I got class tomorrow, right? So we meet every week. Sometimes we're on there from anywhere between an hour and a half. I think I had like a 6-hour call one time. The subject matter was 3.
I believe
but the rest of the society world, I call it Cancel Coach Fridays because we get deep, but it's all true, it's all relevant, and we it's interesting to see people's dispositions on things and watch when they interface the truth, how they kind of unravel certain things and they say, oh, but I never say this is true. I always ask questions and they lead themselves to the truth. And then everybody asks questions and they acknowledge this in the thought progression, right? This is what I mentioned, what I talk about when I mentioned earlier. Not everybody is supposed to be a teacher, but I'm glad that I found my calling as a teacher. I'm 100% supposed to be a teacher. I have zero doubt about that. But that's what the study group is about. It's a monthly. That's the only one that's a monthly subscription. That's why it's only like $50 off because it's a monthly thing. But I say this an hour consultation with me is $135. Where with this discount that they're getting is like $140, right? $140 some change that they're getting a month. So for 1 hour, if it's a consultation, you get it for $135. For $140 something a month, you get me for like anywhere from 36 to like 48 something hours, and you got a whole Discord, or I'm making a Discord, but a Telegram chat where each question's answered, or hey coach, I got a situation, can we do this in class, Mark? Certainly we'll discuss it, or you drop your documents in there. So basically you pretty much get me majority of the week.
That's dope. I'll tell you what I'm hearing, you got to raise your private hourly because you make more sense to me than any $500 an hour bar card I've ever talked to.
I'm glad I'm able to do it, man. I just, and we debunk a lot of things too.
Right? Am I right?
So
seriously, bro, you get on the phone with the lawyer and that guy I told you about that I hired one time. I get on the phone with him. This is before I really understood billable hours. Hey, how's the wife? How's the kid? Oh, you're in Texas? Oh, you know, and I'm like, wait, hold up, man. 20 minutes just went by. Right. And I'm thinking, I got somewhere to be. And I'm like, then I get that bill. And I'm like, $3,500?
Because you asked me about the weather, dude? Stop.
Yeah, billable hours. You know, and that brings me to another point here. So, you know, like in your court competence course, for example, I think some people, well, most people probably think, well, I don't need to know how to operate in court. I just hire a lawyer if I have any problem. And what does it mean for you to concede to be represented? I think this is an important thing to talk about. Are you not essentially telling the court, and I'm using this in the legal context, retarded?
It implies...
Or incompetent, insane, of unsound mind, etc.?
Not necessarily. If they considered you of unsound mind, I don't think you could hire an attorney. You could, they could have to assign one to you. But I would say there's an implication that you are unlearned in the law, that you're not educated, right, in the sciences of litigation. So it does say that. So what it means to get some representation, I won't say is entirely a negative thing. I won't say that. I will tell you that in their bylaw, so to speak, where the attorney, there's attorney and attorney responsibilities, attorney to court responsibilities, and attorney to client. Where the attorney's duty to the client clash with the attorney's duty to the court, they must fail to the court. So it's certainly in that one aspect, though there may be others, in that one aspect, it is disadvantageous to do because they have to default to the court. If it's like, I could help you out, it's gonna make the court look bad, gotta go with the court. You asked out.
Right. Because when I met you guys, I was like, can I just call you guys if I have a problem and you represent me? You're like, that ain't how it works.
I'm really considering going to
law school?
Right. I am.
Oh,
I got my GI.
Because then my next idea was like, dude, let's get one of the Kamala earrings, you know, the earpiece. And like, you're listening in. You guys just tell me what to say when I'm in there. Right. Not that I have a court case going, but you know,
I do want to say this real quick that it just popped up in my mind. While we do have a legal professional involved in these, right? None of this is legal or financial advice at all. These are just purely educational and entertainment purposes only. Got to get that disclaimer on that, right? So,
like everything.
Like everything. Like this
on
right now. None of this is legal advice at all. Right.
All right. Tell me this now, and we'll put links to all your stuff again at lukestorey.com/9ether because you know I think a lot of people are going to really benefit from what you have to say.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, this week, I mean, my head's still reeling. You know, we all got our lives going on, and you know, we probably wouldn't even know anything was happening in the political world if we didn't pick up our phones. what's your take on where we are now? You know, as I said, my take is I see all of that has happened as in the long run positive. And I'm coming from the lens purely, I don't know who's wrong, who's good, bad. I mean, controlled opposition, Operation Warp Speed, like, you know, I've never said like, oh, I think Donald Trump is an awesome guy.
Right.
I don't know if he is or not. But what I know is the alternative that we had was like looking pretty damn grim and fraudulent, if not like just completely demonic.
Okay.
But what is exciting to me right now is not politicians. It's that American people are pissed and they are fucking done. The media is totally discredited because they deserve it. I mean, the legacy dinosaur media, right? Hollywood, because someone, you know, is in a movie, they're going to tell you how to believe because somebody has an aptitude for singing. They have a right to tell me, you know, I mean, I'm just like, wow, I'm seeing grassroots empowerment of people of all stripes, right? I mean, that side talks about, oh, unity and diversity. Really? Unless you disagree with them, where'd your diversity go? Ask Candace Owens how diversity is going.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So to me, it's exciting because I'm like, wow, there's a lot of American people that are saying, no, man, you know, we want to just live our lives and have prosperity and just like leave me alone and let me do my thing as long as I'm not infringing on anyone else. So if I can zoom way out, I see what's happening as like just a massive repudiation and rejection of what has been. Not to sound like her.
No, I got you.
We're burdened by what has been. What's that thing she would say all the time?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't even want to be. Yes, I was just talking, but she said nothing. But
oh my God. Let's not even get into the collard greens in the bathtub.
How she be in these streets.
For those listening that knows that one. But anyway, I could go on, but I said all this to say like, hey, you know, I'm a guy who doesn't believe anyone should be ruling over anyone. So I kind of reject the whole premise.
Right.
But if it has to be this way, because this is where we are right now, because shit's too out of control.
Right.
It seems that we're going in a positive direction because you have like people that think rationally making some decisions that impact all of us rather than people that are completely driven by their emotions, whose emotions are driven and controlled by narratives created by propaganda that the media is shoving down their throat. So it's an interesting, really exciting time to be alive. I don't know what to think yet, but I feel better than I did a few days ago, put it that way. So where are you at with that?
Okay. I'm going to
see. I put this at the end.
I like it, right?
I don't, you know. So I wanted to make sure we really got into the important stuff, which is like no matter who it is in some seat somewhere in a building in Washington, like okay, cool, pick them. But you know, to me, why I started with all the law is like let's actually take responsibility for our own lives, right, and not outsource to them. And maybe we'll evolve to a point where it doesn't even matter who's in those seats, right?
What that means is getting into a different jurisdiction because within this jurisdiction, when you mention rule, it's narrative though, but it's nobody rules. We consent to let them do it because we don't vote in the way we're supposed to vote, and people take less interest into their Congress, their Senate, and their House. But I'm gonna drop an exclusive on you real quick, right? To answer your question. And I promise you, I assure you all, I am not deviating from the question. I want to qualify something for you to show you just how much danger we just escaped. Okay. I promise I'm not deviating. I'm prefacing something, right? In this movement, have you heard refusal is discharge? Have you heard that before?
No.
Okay. A lot of that's a popular thing in this movement. Okay. Where they read something called UCC 3603, and it'll say refusal is discharge. But what it says is the obligation to pay an instrument. If someone pays, right, has an obligation to pay an instrument, and it's made to a person entitled to enforce the instrument, and the payment is refused, the tender, right, tender of an obligation, the tender is refused, then there's discharge. People thinks this means if I give you a bill of exchange and you don't accept it or process it, then I'm discharged. That is not what that code says. What the code says,
I've heard people refer to it in that way, yeah,
and it's wrong.
Yeah.
What it says is if you write a check and I'm the banker, right? If you write a check and you give it to my partner, right? That's the payee, person entitled to enforce the instrument. I have to send him the funds because you're gonna write it to me. Why are you making it out to him? So you're going to write it to him. They're going to make electronic presentment to me. I have to say, who's Luke? I do owe Luke. Is this the right account number? Yes. Are his funds sufficient? Yes. I'm going to send him the money. I'm paying the instrument because an instrument is what? An unconditional order if we're talking about a check. So I have an order to do something. So I'm going to pay that. If he refuses my electronic transfer, then that refusal is discharge. But you still owe him. What is my point? Now, granted, it also talks about an endorsement accommodation party, not a drawee, but that's not the point. Point is, people heard that incorrectly. I'll do another quick one. The application is the money. It is absolutely 100% not the money. I'm sure you would agree that we live in a Federal Reserve banking system. The U.S. banking system is a Federal Reserve system. The Federal Reserve wrote a book. They tell you what they do when they make loans. It's not the application. They say what we do when we make loans is to accept promissory notes in exchange for credits on a borrower's transaction. You agreeing to incur a debt obligation, a liability. That's what makes the money. What's my point in that? Not being so beholden to narrative, understand that what I'm about to tell you, I'm a person that qualifies information first. So let's talk about the danger we just escaped as it relates to this recent presidential election. And understand that what I'm telling you this is not my narrative. It's not my opinion. This is sound, right reasoning. I encourage your entire audience and yourself to go and read the Communist Manifesto. They have a questionnaire. What does it mean to be? Are you a communist? What does it mean to be a communist? XYZ, right? You know what they say the number one goal of communism is? The abolition of private property. So it can be summed up into one thing, the abolition of private property. It gets very deep and very serious. What's the number one way they say they can usher the world into communism? A democratic constitution. Let me ask you this. Is the word democracy anywhere in our constitution? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
Republic.
Not democracy, right? Go pull up your federal constitution, hit Control F and type in democracy. Watch it say 0 out of 0. So you have people trying to push democracy, which there's a problem with that. Because if you remember the Federalist Papers, they had a problem with the democracy. When they came out with a constitutional convention and they decided, you know what is in our constitution? Every state is guaranteed a Republican form of government, right? So when they came out with the constitution, they said, they didn't want no democracy. Democracy was outlined as a problem. They said what it's going to result in. What's the number one way they said they're going to, in the Communist Manifesto? What did they say they're going to do to usher the world into a democratic constitution? Taxation. They said we're going to raise taxes, not on the proletariat, the working class. We're going to raise taxes on the rich specifically because the proletariat, they don't have no property for real anyway. They're all renting, right? They don't own anything in particular, but the rich do. So if the rich can make a way to do XYZ, we tax them out of their private property because what is communism about? I'm going to take all your stuff and I'm going to give it out to the people. So if people are taxed in such a way to where they either can't afford their taxation, the capital gains tax raises so much, that's a whole other thing, but I want to be succinct, so I won't get into that right now. But point is, if you tax somebody all up out of their property, what happens when you don't pay your taxes? Well, the property gets turned over to the municipality or it's an IRS lien to the federal government. And now I have all this stuff. Who's buying up all the residential property right now? BlackRock, Vanguard. I hope the audience knows who that is, right? But if they're buying up all the residential property, then they're trying to get all the rich and tax them out of their particular property. And the number one goal of communism is the abolition of private property. Whom are they saying has the private property? They want to give it all to the government so it won't be private so they can ration every single thing out. So the way they're going to usher the world into communism is by way of a democratic constitution, per their own words. The way they're going to do this is taxation, per their own words. Another way they said they're going to do this in one of their goals is to keep the family split and restrict certain religious freedoms. And what they want to do with the education system to make everything a public education system specifically, where they say, we don't get to just tax one household one time. We can tax them twice because now mom and dad working and we can tax both of you all. And then now the children have to be in our clutches through our education system because education is going to be public and specific, but we're going to make it sound good. What's my overall point when you ask me, how do I feel about the climate in America now? What just happened? Oh, we got 4 more years, I think, of some safety. I think we can actually do something progressive now. And at a minimum, what did I say earlier in this discourse that Benjamin Franklin said? A republic, if you can keep it. It sounds like we get to keep our republic for just at least 4 more years.
What's it like, or what's it been like being a melanated dude, hearing that you know you're gonna get sent back 200 years and this guy's racist and you got to vote Democrat?
Okay.
Personally, I don't know what it's like to be black, obviously, at least in this lifetime. Who
American
knows?
Indian, but it's all right.
But it's like, if someone expected me to vote for a certain party just based on the shade of my skin, I would find that bothersome.
You should certainly find it suspicious. Why is it? Why are you pandering? Why are you catering to this specifically? What do you get out of this in specific? Why do you have something for me specifically if I didn't produce you? See, if we produced you, you said you had something to me. Yeah, that was the goal. You had something for me. That was the goal. That's why we put you in position. But if I don't know you and you just came about and you say, hey, I have something for you. Why? What's that for? So when you ask me what it's like, I'm going to quote James Baldwin, right? He says, and he used the term black, but to be black in America and relatively conscious is to be in an almost constant rage. You ask me how it feels, it's disheartening. I'll be a little personal with you. Recently, I've been diagnosed with a cardiomyopathy. What does this mean? I have a broken heart. That's what this means. Why do I have a broken heart? Because of the state of the community. And now with my more education, the community isn't just exclusive or limited to the black community. It's the country as a whole and how people are participating in it, right? So there was a big racial incident. I was saying some things and people kept doing the stupid thing I told you about. There's no European solutions to African problems. That's a stupid statement because they're not European solutions anyway. Just because predominantly European people are in the government doesn't mean that's a European solution. That's stupid. But I began to become so, I guess, frustrated and I always understood my anger was actually sadness. I was hurt about a lot of stuff. The ignorance and the willful ignorance of it all, that it too much cortisol in my body ended up giving me cardiac effects. So with that said, you ask me how it is when I'm being told by my community, or ironically, even so-called white people are telling me that. That's crazy. I don't even want to fuck you talking to me like that right now. You go somewhere else.
Well, you heard what Malcolm X said. There's nothing more dangerous than the white liberal. Something to that effect.
Yeah. So it's I'll say there's nothing more dangerous to us than a willfully ignorant brother, sister. It's a problem with that. So how does it feel when somebody's telling me to vote a particular way because of the color of somebody's skin? It makes me angry and it makes me sad because just because we say we have a say in our community, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Right, as we got same color skin, we ain't fam. You're not on my side. We don't go to the same family reunion at all. Yep. Right, so all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So with that said, when someone encourages me to vote for policy and legislation, right, based off of racial attitude, it makes me sad for my people and angry at my people even because we are participating in a system to which we are also subject to for the time being. We're participating in a system that we're subject to that we know nothing about. So you're shooting yourself. Even if the black candidate was the right candidate, it was going to affect all the great policy. That's still a problem with me, not that they're the right candidate, but that you don't know why they're the right candidate. Because if you pander to somebody, this is something I say all the time about stroking people's ego. I hate it. I hate when people tell me delivery. It's not what you're saying, it's your delivery. Shut the fuck up. That's stupid. That's so stupid. If I'm a physician and you need to come to me, right, for antibiotics because you're sick and I have them in shot form or pill form, but you don't like needles, but I don't have any more pills. Are you going to deny that which you need to facilitate healing because you don't like how it's delivered? That would make you a fool. So my problem with this is there's two issues when somebody gets something wrong. It's why they get it wrong. So first, we can get to why you got it wrong later, to what you got wrong later. But why you got it wrong, that means your thought progression has a defect in it so that you begin to get a bunch of different things wrong. Let's fix that so that the next subject matter that I'm not around to coach you through or talk you to, you can have some sound right reasoning to apply to this and somebody doesn't think for you. Right? So when you're telling me to vote for somebody based off the color of their skin, that means you are so lost in the sauce. I have another phrase, right? I say, he who's without the sauce is lost, but you can also be lost in the sauce. That's what we say, right? So with that said, You could get the right candidate, but if you don't know why, what this causes, if you constantly pander to people's ego and stroke their ego, all you end up doing is creating a certain dopamine response to where you associate some type of gratification to getting your ego stroked. So now when there's an actual issue at hand, all they got to do is give you something nice, give you something shiny, and make you dance, because all I now have to do is deliver it to you sweetly. You'll pick your own poison. So long as I said it right, so long as I delivered it to you correctly, because that delivery is creating a dopamine response to which you now have some gratification or affinity to being talked to sweetly, that I can sell you some bullshit and you will buy it because I said it nicely. There's a problem. The impetus for change is discomfort. If my leg is falling asleep, it's because I haven't changed. When I move, healing takes place but why did I move? I was uncomfortable. When the pillow gets too hot, you get uncomfortable. What do? You get up and you change, you flip it on the other side. You don't like your living situation, you get up and you change, you move, because you were uncomfortable there. The very impetus for change is discomfort. So you think you're learning something comfortably? You didn't learn it. If you're not forming new dendritic and synaptic connections, you didn't learn it. This is what they mean when they say closed-minded. It's like your chemoelectric traffic routes only have one route. And when that's closed, all the other ones are closed off. You're closed-minded. To be open-minded is to open up the routes. Consult a different plexus, lobe, and cortex to think about things from a different angle. That's why we say these things, right? So I don't like this idea that so long as you say something that gratifies me by way of saying, she's black, I'm black, we're black, that doesn't mean that you vote for that person. I could say it should imply, or it should certainly suggest that you have an interest in something, but here's again, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So what if you have the same color skin, but you're doing something that's gonna go against our better interests as a people? Because you black, I should vote for you. That's literally destructive. When people talk about practicing cooperative economics, right? I would rather, I did a show, I did a Facebook Live about this before, where the George Floyd thing popped off, right? And I was saying all throughout history, boycotting is what always got results because it's all about the money. But Montgomery bus boycott. We stopped riding the buses. They said, okay, you can stay where you want, right? We boycotted Netflix for somebody said something racial or something like that. Netflix put $100 million in black-owned banks soon after that, right? So leverage the money or your participation and get what you want. So I made a live about that, and I posted this website called WeBuyBlack.com. So I was talking about be more self-sufficient. We always talk about how we need XYZ. Go purchase that. The first person to comment and make a purchase was one of my nuclear engineering buddies. He was one of my supervisors at one point, white dude. He said, hey, you know where I can get some black on, blah, blah, blah. First person. He now, as a hobby, he would make pins, like custom-made pins. I ended up grouping with another group of people, 2 melanated women, 2 sisters, and all they do is spend their money on Dolce & Gabbana and Louis V, you know, the people that go to the parties and go put on blackface and have lynch stock puppets on their purses, those people. I would never give you a dime of my money. Fuck your business. I don't want you to make another single dime because you go put it in the hands of pedophiles and demonic people that do fucked up rituals like that. I would rather go give my money to this white man who wants to put his money in black-owned businesses. That's cooperative economics. How does it make me feel when somebody tells me to vote for somebody black because they black? It makes me pissed and it makes me sad because you're easily swindled and you're fooled. And all somebody got to do is make you feel good about something and you're going to participate.
What about when they're Indian and they pretend to be black?
Well, that's ironic because a lot of black people are actually Indians and the Indians pretending to be black.
No,
that makes me want to buy.
East,
The subcontinental Indian.
Yeah.
That makes me want to drown some. Well, I don't think I should say that.
Makes you want to drown puppies.
I was going to say I'm going to say I'm recanting this. I was going to say it makes me want to drown somebody in a tub of greens. That's what it makes me want to do. That's what it makes me want to do. That same tub where you wash your greens, that makes me want to hold you under there because fucking you wrong with you. Run you over in those streets, you be pissing me off. But it makes me even madder when our people will hear that, see the proof or some evidence. Let's say they don't even believe it, but you certainly haven't disqualified it, that this person may in fact not be black or at least not be as black as they claim. They say, well, she's still a little bit black and it doesn't matter. Evidently it matters to her. She's lying about how black she is. Why lie? What did she try to get you to do? And don't you see it's working in real time because you're still fighting for somebody to just lie dead to your face? It makes me pissed. That's how it makes me
Thank you for your passion.
Yeah.
I can
I try to
appreciate
keep it under
that.
control, especially because the mic
You
I
don't
want
need
to mess
to.
up your equipment.
We're in what, hour 3 here, Jared?
Oh, for real? I thought it was been like 45 minutes, man. We've been cooking.
After hour 3, all bets are off, gloves are off.
For sure.
We can do and say what we want. But yeah, thank you for your perspective. I mean, that's the thing I really enjoy about my job, man, is I get to sit down and talk to people whose lives I have not lived.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of where they're from in the world, what they do in the world, what their area of expertise is. I am fascinated by human beings and what they do and who they are, you know? So it's like, oh man, I wonder if I could look through your eyes at the world, man, it's like, what does it look like? You know, that's why I ask questions like that.
So
and I love you're talking about an open mind too, man, because it's like, I think many people have a misconception about an open mind being a naive or gullible mind. And to me, having a rigid, fixed mind is the most gullible position you can possibly be in.
Because you're
right? Because it's like we think about, oh, you know, I have an open mind because I'm willing to let in new ideas. Like I used to think I was open-minded because I was raised in the Bay Area. My mom was really liberal. I mean, you know, we accepted people for who they were. We weren't judgmental. You know, I was like, yeah, I got an open mind. You know, I'm open to anything and anyone, right?
Such an interesting.
But as I started to mature, I realized that my mind was actually closed because I had developed a worldview that was completely based on falsehoods and non-reality. And so when I started to approach my spirituality, it's kind of like the law thing I said earlier. I said, oh no, it's not that I'm not open to bring me Eastern mysticism, you know, bring me the Hindus, bring me the Muslims, great, you know, I'll read all the books. It's not that I'm not open, it's that I have preconceived ideas that I won't let go of.
Predispositions,
right? It's like I picture it kind of like the old saloon. They had that door that swings in and out, right? And go, let everything in, but it's about the shit you need to let out. That's the open mind, is a malleable mind where you can, you know, have the humility to admit, you know what, I said this thing last week, but I've learned more and I was wrong, or I was partially wrong. I didn't have the whole story. Now I know more. I mean, imagine like if people could, you know, just surrender their pride and be willing to unlearn. I got a friend named Cal who's got a podcast called The Great Unlearn. And that's kind of what it's all about. It's like, hey, tell me who you are. I want to find out where I've been wrong. You know?
Dope.
Yeah. And I'm like, God damn it, I wish I would have thought of that name.
Yeah, that's pretty live. Yeah.
I don't even know what my podcast name means anymore. I've had it for so long, it's too late to change it, I think. But yeah, I think the open-mindedness is really important. And one of the best ways to achieve that, right, is by asking questions of people like you. How do you see the world? How do you see law? How do you see our society? How do you see politics? And I can let in those new ideas. And if they displace ones that are less valuable than I've been holding on to, you can have it. I'll let it go. I just, you know.
That reminds me of a quote I was saying, right, with James Baldwin. And what you said about open mind is I'm throw not a curveball at you, but I'm gonna drop something on you, see how you like it.
All right.
But when he mentions to be black in America and relatively conscious is to be in an almost constant rage. So there's 2 fixed variables, right? Your skin color. And for context, right, being in America. Now, there's 2 other variables, relatively conscious and constant rage. So if we adopt and agree with that phrase, then don't ask me why I'm pissed about something. You should ask me, well, what don't I know? Because if you're relatively conscious, you would be in an almost constant rage. Now, this holds true for anybody that's beholding of knowledge, not just being black in America. At this point, if you're a U.S. citizen in America, if you're a citizen in America, if you're a national in America and relatively conscious, you will be in an almost constant rage, right? So with what you just mentioned about being open-minded or closed-minded, there's a very delicate balance, right? Because while you're open-minded, as in you allow certain perspectives in so that you can study them, but that's kind of it. But just so that you can study them. And if you're closed-minded, you don't let new things in. Well, you ever heard somebody say, weak men make weak societies? And
weak men make...
weak societies make weak men, or I start from the beginning. I think it's strong men make
easy times.
Easy times make weak societies, or weak men,
and weak men make hard times.
Society times, same thing, right? But it's kind of like with too much open-mindedness requires a more rigid culture. Remember what I talked about culture being a system, a practice of customs that would circumvent you or prevent you from making more detrimental effects, because if you adopt too much of anything, you may be subject to doing anything. So you, with a open mind, you need a culture of scholarship. You have to. And with a more closed mind, right, you may end up trapped in a particular culture that doesn't work for this day and time. Right? So it needs to be a little more fluid. If the more rigid-minded you are, if you're going to be rigid to your culture, and your culture allows for, you see what I'm saying, some fluidity, so to speak, you won't be subject to missing out on too much, or you'll be able to move out certain variables and say, this doesn't work for us anymore. Let's put this one in. Let's see how this works. This doesn't work. Let's add this in, but let's get rid of these two and see if that works for it addresses our concerns, right? But it's ultimately what you need. And I say this all the time, scholarly disposition. You have to be scholarly. There is no way around it. You can't take the lazy or the easy way out. If you want to succeed in anything in life, you got to work at it. You have to be scholarly. So if you're going to be open-minded, I think you should be as open-minded as you can be. Chastise the information as it comes, but don't dismiss it, because you may void yourself. If you void yourself of any opportunity to grow or learn or even advance in certain areas you have some understanding on, you're doing just that. You're not growing, right? You may miss something. So allow whatever you can allow in, but allow it as in interface with it. Don't automatically adopt anything, but you have to be scholarly when you're addressing things. And in order to be scholarly, you honestly can't be too closed-minded, because now you're literally limiting your human potential, your spiritual potential, because it's mind, body, soul, or the heart and the gut are actually your brain dispositions connected through the vagus nervous system. That's why when you think too hard, you get hungry and things of that nature, right? You can go brain dead, still be alive, but you can't go heart dead and still be alive, right? So the heart and gut are very deep things. But because 90% of your active, I won't say that, most of your active DNA isn't even yours. It's your gut microbiome. It gets deep. But point being, right, is if you're not open-minded, meaning I come from a biochemical disposition, you are limiting the amount of dendritic and synaptic activity that you're able to make. So they say 10% of your brain is what most humans use, right? A savant can use something north of 20, or if I have those numbers correctly. But the point is, we have a very limited use of our brain. If you have a very limited use of your brain, is your pineal stimulated? Are you able to facilitate higher consciousness? Are you able to understand more about the material world and even the spiritual or ethereal world around you so that you can advance? Even then, you have to be open-minded. You can't be too rigid because you're limiting your human potential. You got to be open-minded, but you don't want to be open-minded without a system that when you adopt so many things in, you end up closing your potential off because you're adopting things that shut off your ability to rise up the kundalini, so to speak, to rise up your understanding and your potential on earth. So it is deep though, but
I hear in that you could boil that down to discernment versus judgment, right? To be able to discern something, to be able to determine what it is through investigation. And that's like your gateway, whereas judgment is just like, nope.
Out the gate.
Yeah.
I would even say
judging something on its face rather than like, well, let me toy with that out here before I let it in. My discernment is going to, through the wisdom that I've earned through past discernment, is going to give me more of an ability to determine whether or not that idea is of value.
Let's have a higher frequency understanding of judgment. You utilize your discernment so that you can make judgment. Judgment is in yay or nay.
Oh, right.
I discern this in such a way, we're going to adjudicate it. Boom, we're going to adopt it. This is what we do.
He brings it back to law.
It's all connected, right? I told you at the beginning of the conversation, it's all connected.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we talk about. Law is law. That's why these systems came about, because law is law. We observed this in nature. We said, okay, let's do what nature's doing. We'll just do it as men, right? But
beautiful. Yeah. All right. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced you in your life that you can share with us?
That's a very interesting question. Okay. I'll say my very first influential teaching, because it didn't come from an individual, but teaching is, I'll tell a story. It's kind of funny to most people. It was bothersome to me at first, but it was a life experience I had with cleaning. That was my first real edifying, profound moment, right? Is that I was told to dust some furniture. I was 7, right? I could read, all this good stuff. In Black households, you really don't question your grandma. She tell you to do something, you do it, you get shit smacked out you if you ask about it too many times. So I knew, or I had an idea that I'm not allowed to ask for any clarification. I was told to dust the furniture the way Black folks dust things. We have a dust rag, we get some pledge, right? Pledge said all purpose, right? Spread on the rag, it's all purpose. And when I was told to dust the furniture, this is consists of the furniture, the wood is consists of the furniture. But I'm like, I don't think I should be dusting a couch. And it wasn't even a leather couch either. It was something that didn't accumulate dust. But I was told to dust the furniture, and I know I can't ask you about it. But nothing in my soul felt like I should be putting pledge on this type of fabric. But it is in fact furniture, and this thing says all purpose, and I'm 7. So I'm like, I'm using discernment and sound right reasoning, deductive and inductive reasonings to make a decision because I can't not get it done because you're going to smack shit out of me. Or if I ask you about it, you're going to smack shit out of me. Or at least that's my belief. So when I begin to dust the furniture, I get the shit smacked out of me. I'm like, what did I do? Why would you do that? And I was crying. I said, you told me to dust the furniture. And they just looked and they was like, so me observing that, they looked at me like I was stupid. And then literally the next day, Ashley's Furniture Home Store commercial comes on and they have fucking sofas on there. And I look at all the adults. Y'all don't see this? Was I not tasked? Why don't you say what you mean as opposed to hoping that I understand what you meant at 7? The reason that this was profound is not about me beating my chest, saying, hey, look how smart I am. That was my first glimpse and understanding. This was so pivotal to me, is that just because somebody's in a position of authority or has some credential because simply they're adults does not mean that they're correct. That was such a profound, because that allowed me to address information the way we just talked about, using discernment. And I don't have to believe everything an attorney says is correct, because they get judges and attorneys, they lose cases or get cases overturned all the time. So they're not always correct, right? So that was the first one. That was a very profound teaching moment for me. There was another teacher. Now, the reason I kind of at first said this is interesting question is there's some controversy around this individual. And when I say this, people will tend to say, well, he was in jail for XYZ. He's not in jail for anything that people said he's in jail for. And if you study the case, what everybody said he did and why the main thing they said they had evidence of what he did, it wasn't his. And that was proven, and nobody addresses that. But I would have to say, I may get some slack for this, but it's true. Brother Polite. Brother Polite was someone whom I've never met, but I always grew up with a mindset of wonder. I would literally think about things like, why does this table fold the way that it does? Why is this carpet like this? Why do I get an electric shock on carpet when I have socks on or this on, but not that? Why did I slip on this? Why if you spin around? I always had, it was why, always why. And I grew up feeling very alone or even stupid in my dispositions because of, at a young age, I would think, well, everybody can be wrong. Now I'm like, yes, everybody else is fucking wrong. Yes, they are. But it took a while for me to get there. And one day somebody was telling me things I never heard before, things I didn't learn formally. I was using sound right reasoning. I was like, I don't know, because it was the God conversation, right? When people say, well, how do you know it's not a flying spaghetti monster after that weird argument? And I'm like, look, I don't know if it's an invisible giant doing this to see if the wind's blowing. All I know is that we can observe leaves on a branch moving. So that which we cannot see does have a physical impact on our physical world, right? I know we can have a barometer, something that measures the change, and what this is designed to do is a change in pressure. So we can safely, we're not stupid if we come to the conclusion of it's a change in air pressure. That's what's making the wind. That's what you're observing is the wind blowing. And someone, I would speak like that. Someone tagged me on Facebook in a video that led me to what's called the conscious community right now. And they were saying a lot of the things that I was saying that I was never formally educated in. So it made me feel like I'm not crazy. I'm not, it's a whole world of people out there for me. So from then I got into some sacred geometry, which are things I wondered about that I never knew there was a name for, and some advances on those, religious corpuses, right? And all of these different things that I've always thought about, that I even said some things and I don't know where they came from. So this kind of solidified more of my understanding of the ethereal connections and all. Because how you know what I know, and I wasn't told it in almost the same way, and I was able to advance on that. So it's a guy named Brother Polite. I would have to say, to a degree, I would even say the conscious community saved my life, because I was in a very, very lonely place in my heart and mind, because I couldn't talk to nobody, or I had to diminish a lot of myself just to exist within spaces with people, because don't nobody know what I'm talking about, or I'm tripping, or I'm doing too much, and it's not that deep. It quite literally is, in fact, that deep. I couldn't be talking about it sensibly if it wasn't that deep. That means there's more depth to the subject, don't you think? You're doing too much. All right, fuck. So I felt like I could safely be more of myself. Not more of myself, but more, I can be more out loud about it instead of waiting till people get to irking me with their incompetence. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. Go. And now it's that way. So I would have to say, Brother Polite. My last very profound teaching moment, I will say, was I was babysitting. I was watching one of my siblings, right? Parents' date night, and I don't know what they were doing, all that good stuff. But I was watching one of my siblings, and I got to observe influence in real time, because I would always think, well, how is it that people always talk about being influenced and XYZ? I never really remember feeling like I was, at this time, like I was doing something because I'm copying somebody else. I became conscious of that when you see little people that you're responsible for begin to mimic you in so many ways. It made me more, I don't have any children myself, but it made me more conscious and aware of the fact that, oh no, people do in fact react to things based off of their observations. So I remember a time where I watched him, he wouldn't cry or have a certain reaction for certain things until we watched a cartoon. And he began to become sad about things like that from that cartoon. And it made me think, oh shit, that is quite, people legitimately are programmed through media and TV and propaganda and all these other type of things. So I have to say, at the time, my 2-year-old little brother taught me a whole lot, because I was getting into it with a lot of adults at that time, because at a certain point in time, I was like, look, y'all not going to try to convince me that I'm crazy or incompetent right now. I'm telling you for a fact, this is sensible if you would, but just hear me out. And I'm thinking, why can't you hear this? Why aren't you listening? What is preventing you from listening? Why do you act or behave this way? Because I don't think, you're not really influenced by nothing. What would you have been influenced about really? Like really, what would you? And then me seeing somebody grow up and mimic you or mimic what they see on TV, or if you run into something, you're like, whatever. And it's a viral video about this where people would also hold their children and they would hit the wall and they would touch the back of the child's head and say, oh, I'm so sorry. And the child would cry. Wasn't even hit. Was not hit. So that programming woke me up to a lot. And all of those things that I remember the most certainly had a heavy impact on why I teach the way that I teach. Because I told you my call in life, I'm so certain, is to be a teacher. And I was able to observe my number one skill in doing that, which is why those teachers and those teachings are so pivotal to me, is I observe why you got the wrong answer. I can hear why you said what you said. It's because you thought this one thing meant that. That's how I know you heard something incorrectly, or you think this means something that doesn't. Like, for example, the application is the money thing. People read that because in the Federal Reserve Act, it'll mention that you can take an application for Federal Reserve notes. You can take that to a particular branch, right? And they can issue you Federal Reserve notes if you come with some equivalent collateral and all this other good stuff, right? But they heard you're getting money when you bring this application up there. I know what you didn't read, or when they say refusal is discharge. It's written, if tender of payment to pay an instrument is made to a person entitled to enforce the instrument, and the tender is refused, there's discharge. I know why you think that says that. It doesn't say that. So because I can hear why you think that, I'm able to bring you out of it, because I know influence. I know that you ran into a narrative. I can hear why you think that because I know where you got it from. I know that you're easily influenced and you never did scholarship yourself. I know that you looked at somebody like an attorney or somebody who's big in the movement that has a large platform. I know that you look at them and you take what they say to face value, like I did my grandmother when I was 7. You're an adult. I can't question you. You're not wrong. Like I did my younger brother when I say, I see why you're so influenced this way in particular because you're mimicking things that you just seen, right? I know that. That's why those two aren't teachers. Those are teachings that was so pivotal to me because I've been able to help as many people that I have been able to help through edifying them sound, right reasoning and making sure that I reveal to them, or they reveal to themselves, really, right? They reveal to themselves there is in fact a proper way of thinking, not a proper thing to think. So I say that my motto is, one of my mottos is, I'm not interested in making mini me's. I want to make major U's. I don't want you to copy me. I don't even like when people say, this is SOE's information. This is non-ether's information. I don't have any information. I might have a specific method or process or teaching style or curriculum, but I don't want you to run around like a mini me. I want you to find your potential. I want you to be a major you. I don't want you to be a mini me, right? So I always say, do that and think. Too often we think to satisfaction and rarely ever to completion. You have a question in your mind. You make sense of something. You hear an answer that satisfies your question, but you didn't go through to completion. You didn't say, okay, now I have to chastise the answer. So we fall too short because we're influenced by somebody who has credentials like a grandmother to a child or an attorney to someone who's not proficient in law. Right. And we're heavily influenced by things because somebody else said they did. Or I'm going to say it's a kangaroo court, even though I've never heard this term before. I don't see it anywhere in law, but somebody said, and this is their reaction to it. So now I'm mad. I'm mad that they overturned Roe v. Wade because I see a bunch of other people mad about it to the point where I go to a rally and end up miscarrying a child because I got trampled because the rally turned violent on a baby you didn't even want to abort because you were mad and you let somebody put a battery in your back to be upset about something you had no business being upset about, not because you weren't trying to abort a child, because nobody aborted or banned your right to abortions. You don't understand your government. That's why you were mad, because you were following some other people that also didn't understand their government. That's why those two teaching moments were so pivotal to me. I can see and hear that, so I can bring you out of it, because I'm not going to just put my disposition on you. That's why I don't say, no, it's this. I ask you a bunch of questions. Well, if I do a bill of exchange for XYZ, can I do this? Well, first, let me ask you this. Would you be asking me this question if it was a check? No. Is a check a draft? Yes. Is a bill of exchange a draft? Yes. Are they both unconditional orders? Yes. So why are you asking me that question? Not that I don't want you to ask me. I want you to realize first and foremost, you have a predisposition that's muddying your understanding. Now let me take you through it, but it's always going to be by way of a series of questions. That's it. And that's been my blessing.
Beautiful. We have that in common. We like to ask questions.
Absolutely we do.
Thanks for joining me today, man.
Thank you for having me.